Hello, good morning. Okay. So hopefully you had the time to settle down. If there are any questions, please raise those questions. If there is any problem, उस प्रॉब्लम को पहले सॉल्व करते हैं. कोई प्रॉब्लम है, कोई क्वेश्चन है? हाँ, यहाँ से है. पीछे आप लोग सेटल डाउन हो गए? कोई क्वेश्चन है, कोई इशू है, उठाना चाहेंगे आप? कुछ पढ़ रहे हैं अखबार में नया? सबको कह रहा हूं मैं. इफ यू हैव एनी क्वेश्चंस, क्लैरिफिकेशंस, प्लीज फील फ्री टू आस्क. हाँ, आप क्या कह रहे थे? पॉलिसी ऑफ मिनिमम डिटरेंस, ये कहाँ पढ़ लिया आपने? Okay, so policy of minimum deterrence, basically if you look at the nuclear policy of India, it is based on certain principles कि हम कैसे और किन परिस्थितियों में nuclear weapons का इस्तेमाल करेंगे, in what circumstances, what ways we would use nuclear weapons. So there is no consolidated policy, but from different statements this is what we know, that a primary feature of India's nuclear policy is no first use, that India would not be the first country to use nuclear weapons. That is what we have told to the international community. ये हमारा commitment है. Why do we have nuclear weapons then if we won't use them in the first instance? No first use के अलावा क्या principle है? No first use के अलावा principle है credible minimum deterrence. That our nuclear weapons are not for the purpose of our aggressive designs, but they are for defensive purposes. To shield India from any nuclear blackmail. It has been developed in the context of India's neighbors, and we are talking about China having nuclear weapons. So we are saying that our nuclear weapons are for defensive purposes, to defend our interests. If we are attacked, then we retain the ability to retaliate. And that is where credible minimum deterrence comes. Credibility comes from declared ability of nuclear weapons, as well as credibility comes from the ability to deploy as well as use nuclear weapons. Minimum, we are not going to enter into any nuclear race. हम केवल न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब बनाने के लिए न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब नहीं बनाएंगे. हम उतना मिनिमम नंबर ऑफ वेपन्स या वॉरहेड्स रखेंगे जितना जरूरी है जवाब देने के लिए. तो क्रेडिबल मिनिमम डिटरेंस. डिटरेंस इज द आइडिया. द डिटरेंस इज द आइडिया व्हिच बेसिकली मीन्स that you are signaling to your adversary that you have the capability to respond to any aggression, and you have the capability to defend your interests. So by having that capability and declaring that capability, what you are doing is you are defending your interest. You are deterring the other from aggression towards you. So basically credible minimum deterrence, that the number of nuclear weapons India would have would be strictly on the basis of its requirements of deterring any nuclear attack and retaliating. Second strike capability जिसको कहते हैं. Third है, we say that if chemical and biological weapons are used against India, then in that context India has opened the possibility of using nuclear weapons. If chemical and biological weapons are used, then India may use nuclear weapons. And India also says that we would not be using nuclear weapons against non-nuclear states. Non-nuclear states के खिलाफ nuclear weapons का इस्तेमाल नहीं करेंगे. तो वहाँ से minimum deterrence की बात आ गई कि minimum कितना force चाहिए आपको deter करने के लिए कोई aggression, है ना? वो मतलब है किसी भी सेंस में. न्यूक्लियर सेंस में मैंने आपको बता दिया, बट ट्रेडिशनल सेंस में भी हो सकता है आपका डिटरेंस, कि आपकी पावर का एग्जाम्पल देख के ही सामने वाला आप पे हमला ना करे. तो वो बेसिक आइडिया है इसके पीछे, है ना? तो ये तो अलग से कहीं से पढ़ के आए थे. कहाँ छपा था ये? सी राजा मोहन सर का एक आर्टिकल आया हुआ था. क्या लिख रहे थे वो उसमें? सी राजा मोहन राइट्स इन द इंडियन एक्सप्रेस. हंसने के बजाय आप अगर पढ़ पाए तो पढ़ लें. यूपीएससी के लिए बहुत ही बढ़िया आर्टिकल लिखते हैं वो. हाँ, क्या कह रहे थे? एक लाइन में थीसिस जरा बता दीजिए अपने दोस्तों को भी. चेंज करनी चाहिए. क्रेडिबल मिनिमम डिटरेंस से हमको चेंज करना चाहिए. नो फर्स्ट यूज, ये कई लोग कहते रहते हैं कि नो फर्स्ट यूज चेंज करना चाहिए, क्रेडिबल मिनिमम डिटरेंस चेंज करना चाहिए, बट दैट इज व्हाट इंडियाज पोजीशन इज. मिनिमम रखेंगे न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स को, पर्पस क्या है हमारे न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स का? डिटरेंस, एग्रेशन नहीं है, डिटरेंस हमारे न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स का पर्पस है। अभी देखो ऑनलाइन सवाल आने लगे, रिसेंटली वियतनाम इज इन न्यूज, सो कैन द क्वेश्चन कम फ्रॉम द सेम इन रेफरेंस टू चाइना? It is highly unlikely that a standalone question on Vietnam would come. We have not seen such questions coming in the examination. But if you are reading Vietnam, as I've had advised to somebody else also, reading one article for these kinds of relations sometimes is enough. Read one article and you have the information to write any answer, any question that comes in the examination. So examination preparation is not on the basis of what if. अगर ये हो गया तो क्या होगा? You have to identify certain general pattern that the UPSC हैज, किस तरह के सवाल। तो बहुत सारे रिलेशंस हैं, कुछ रिलेशंस इंपॉर्टेंट हैं इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ चाइना। ऑफ कोर्स इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ चाइना आर रिलेशंस विद साउथ ईस्ट एशिया, आर रिलेशंस विद वियतनाम आर इंपॉर्टेंट। दीज आर few of the options that we can use to deter China or to create a larger strategy against China. अभी एक और सवाल आ गया, what is Turkey stand in Russia-Ukraine war? I don't know. I don't know because I follow India's foreign policy. I don't follow Turkey's foreign policy. I am discouraging this question because nobody is going to ask you in this examination what is Turkey's position. All right, but understand broadly, Turkey is part of NATO. All right, Turkey is a member of NATO. What is NATO's position on Russia-Ukraine war? Of course, to deter Russia, to make Russia scale back its military operations. But NATO is not doing anything directly. So Turkey has its own relations with Russia also. So Turkey basically would like to balance its relations with Russia and would like to take the advantage of its membership of NATO. What is Afghanistan-Pakistan trade and transit agreement? So Afghanistan-Pakistan trade transit agreement means that Afghan trucks or Afghan vehicles can cross over into Pakistan and there can be seamless movement of trade related vehicular traffic between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Afghanistan and Pakistan have that agreement. However, India also sought such an agreement. India is not allowed to access Pakistan's territory to reach to Afghanistan. So trade transit agreement, basically Pakistan offered the use of its territory for the purpose of trade or supplies to Afghanistan. Akshay Nimbalkar. Recently there was a statement from Pakistan that it invites any third country in CPEC project. Okay, good. So Pakistan is free to do so. Thus can we say it is for Afghanistan as there is regime change? How does it impact India if any third nation from our neighborhood joins CPEC? What options India does have to prevent it or tackle China's influence in our backyard? ये बहुत सारे सवाल एक साल पूछ लिए। पहला, if Pakistan says that CPEC should be extended to any third country, most likely it may mean Afghanistan. Most likely it may mean Afghanistan. Right now, Pakistan and Taliban, which rules Afghanistan, have cordial relations. So it is highly likely that such a project can be envisaged. China would like to maintain its influence in Afghanistan. China has very good relations with Pakistan. So ये possibility तो हमेशा है. Thus, how does it impact India if any third nation from our neighborhood joins CPEC? First of all, it is not going to directly or drastically change anything on the ground. CPEC को हम object करते हैं, लेकिन CPEC बन रहा है. So तीसरा कोई देश भी join कर लेगा तो भी CPEC बनता रहेगा. तो any drastic or substantial change is not going to happen. What it would mean that China is strengthening its position in our neighborhood. That is already a problem. But it is not a surprise because Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, all of these neighbors have already accepted China's Belt and Road Initiative, have already in some ways become part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. So any other neighbor joining the CPEC would undermine India's position. That is at the best that we can say, would undermine India's position. What is India's position? That the CPEC passing through Gilgit-Baltistan is not right because it violates India's sovereignty. It violates certain cardinal principles of international relations like sovereignty or territorial integrity. So any third country joining the CPEC would undermine India's position, would signal strengthening of China's reach in the neighborhood. And also, if it is Afghanistan, it may mean that India's difficulty of lack of direct physical access to Afghanistan becomes complex. All right, because अब उस प्रोजेक्ट में शामिल होना हमारे लिए और मुश्किल हो जाएगा. बट इन द पास्ट China has said that let's work on connectivity project. India and China have tried to work on connectivity projects. Nepal thinks that it can become a bridge between India and China in terms of connectivity. So connectivity can be seen from various perspectives. CPEC, our major objection is what? Violation of sovereignty. Now there is no compromise on that. There is no compromise on that. But in the past we have talked about India and China, the possibility of India and China working in third countries. ऐसा भी हमने बात किया है. So generally, if any other country joins CPEC, it undermines India's position, it strengthens China. And now, in terms of access to Afghanistan, it makes it rather more difficult if Afghanistan joins it. What are the options? What does the option India have to tackle China's influence in our backyard? Option वही है, neighborhood first को strengthen करें, projects identify करें, उनको implement करें, emerge as a credible deterrence, credible development partner for your smaller neighbors, leverage the elements which are in your favor. What are the elements which are in India's favor? Geography and culture. Geography and culture are distinctly in India's favor. So leverage geography and culture. And then partner with like-minded countries. If you don't have resources, then partner with Australia, partner with US, partner with Japan in promoting infrastructure project in our neighborhood. Apart from that, there are certain domestic steps that we can take. Military modernization is one step that we can take. Defense indigenization is another step that we can take. Only when we are capable to defend our interests, we would be able to counter China. So there are certain external steps that we can take. There are certain internal steps that we can take to counter China's influence in our backyard or in our neighborhood. That is basically the intent of this question. Now, in yesterday's class, I mentioned 1593. Correct is to 2593, 2593, resolution 2593. वो थोड़ा सा correct कर लें आप. (2593), not 1593, but 2593 resolution of the Security Council in the context of Afghanistan. Correct कर लें, आप सभी को बोल रहा हूँ. 1593 मैंने बताया था आपको, बस 1000 resolution और आगे चले जाएं. 2593. All right, 1593 dates back to 2005. तो वो मेरे दिमाग से उतर गया था. हाँ, किसका? हाँ, कौन सा ह्यूमन राइट? देखो भाई, ह्यूमन राइट एक ऐसी चीज है जिसके बारे में बात सभी करते हैं, पर कमजोर का कोई ह्यूमन राइट नहीं होता है. यानी कि देयर इज अ प्रिंसिपल एंड देयर इज अ प्रैक्टिस. इट इज अनफॉर्चुनेट what has happened in Afghanistan. Of course, there has been human rights violation, but this is how the world is. So there has been a discussion on the situation in UN Human Rights Council, but what can UN Human Rights Council do? Nothing. There has been consideration for human rights and humanitarian aspects in the resolutions, like the resolution 2593 that India had proposed. So whichever forum is talking about Afghanistan, they are underlining the fact that human rights, women rights, minority rights, the right to evacuate from a crisis situation, all these should be respected. ऐसा इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी कह रही है. तो कई सिचुएशन में आप केवल कह पाते हैं. आपको क्या लगता है कि भाई देखो, अगर कोई इस दुनिया में सबसे बड़ा ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेटर है तो वो कौन सा देश है? आप सभी ने खुद कह दिया, यूएस. आप क्या सजा दे रहे हैं यूएस को? यूएस कम्स अप every year with a report called Religious Freedom Report, where it talks about minority rights or other religious freedoms in other countries. There is one country which is missing from that report. Which is that country? The US itself. तो वो अपने human rights की situation को खुद criticize नहीं कर रहे हैं. So that is the duplicity that you would see in the context of human rights globally. But human rights are important. Sometimes, unfortunately, human rights become subservient to other interests of nations. Power politics becomes much more important. So what has happened? Nothing much has happened. But certainly if you think it at the level of discussion, discussion has happened at the United Nations Security Council, it has happened at the United Nations Human Rights Council. तो discussion हो रहा है, बातचीत हो रही है, documents में अच्छी बातें आपको सुननी है तो वो मिल जाएगा आपको. This is what has happened, right? So in this situation, we say that international community remains engaged with the issue of human rights in Afghanistan. So अपील कर रहे हैं तालिबान को, ये सारी चीजें हो रही है ना. अगर आपको कोई concrete action चाहिए तो I am sorry to disappoint you, not possible. Okay. Sharanveer Singh, 1593-2005. I already said that, right? My bad. I already said that. I hope you made the correction. Now let's talk about India-Bangladesh relations, right? The other neighbor that we are going to talk about. Now when we talk about India-Pakistan relations or India-Afghanistan relation, we realize one thing, that it is very simple to say that, you know, we have a difficult relations with Pakistan. There is no doubt about it. It's a foreign policy challenge. With Afghanistan, we say that generally we have had cordial relations, friendly relations with Afghanistan. We have cultural, civilizational linkages. In the recent past, India tried to contribute to the state building process in Afghanistan, but the scenario changed after 2021. So we understand it that in Afghanistan, the difficulty is not in the relation itself, the difficulty is the circumstances surrounding Afghanistan. The way external actors have affected Afghanistan and the way now domestically Afghanistan has become a conflict-prone state. So that is our difficulty. So these are not very normal relations that we talked about. Now Bangladesh is one relation which is a normal relation in our neighborhood, and many argue that it is an example of one of the most successful relations that India has. आपकी जो भी राय हो इस रिलेशन के बारे में. कई बार क्या होता है कि हम अपनी मर्जी के ही न्यूज सोर्सेस पढ़ रहे होते हैं, अपनी मर्जी के इश्यूज पे फोकस कर रहे होते हैं, तो डिपेंडिंग ऑन दैट आवर व्यू इज फॉर्म्ड. बट जनरली स्पीकिंग, एट द लेवल ऑफ गवर्नमेंट, at the level of scholars, India-Bangladesh relation is considered to be one of the most successful bilateral relations of recent times. So every relationship has a nature. So that nature has to be clearly understood by you. Alright, आपकी अपनी personal राय हो सकती है, बहुत सारे aspects हो सकते हैं, and that is important, but what is also important is your opinion should not be very different from what most of the people are saying in this examination. आप ऐसा नहीं कह सकते कि यूपीएससी ने पूछा मैं तो मानता ही नहीं, मैं कुछ और लिख के आता हूँ. So generally there is an understanding, common understanding about anything, वो आपको क्लियर होनी चाहिए. उसके बाद आप अपना स्पेशल ओपिनियन जोड़ते रहिए, और जो लोग IFS बनना चाहते हैं, you would have the opportunity to participate in policy making or policy execution later on, तो और भी अच्छा है. अभी एग्जाम के लिए क्या करना है, चीज़ों को जनरल सिंपल अंडरस्टैंडिंग के लेवल पे रखना है. Now let's look at the location of Bangladesh, right? The location of Bangladesh. So if you look at the location of Bangladesh, it should be clear to you that it is part of the eastern sub-region in South Asia. All right, eastern sub-region. अभी तक हम कहाँ बात कर रहे थे? We were talking about northwestern sub-region of South Asia. This is the eastern sub-region of South Asia. Now if you look at this location, first thing that should be clear to you is which are the Indian states sharing borders with Bangladesh. Simple atlas based exercise. These are simple questions that can lead to location based questions in UPSC. So which are the states sharing borders with Bangladesh? West Bengal, आसाम, मेघालय, मिजोरम, त्रिपुरा, और ये तो हो गया वेस्ट बंगाल. वेस्ट बंगाल से आप आगे गए, ये क्या है? शिलोंग कॉरिडोर, सिलीगुड़ी कॉरिडोर. शिलोंग अच्छी जगह है, दूसरों का मजाक उड़ाने में बहुत मजा आता है. आप खुद बोले और आपका कोई मजाक उड़ाए तो आपको बुरा लग जाएगा, है ना. चलिए कोई नहीं. सिलीगुड़ी कॉरिडोर. सिलीगुड़ी कॉरिडोर कनेक्ट्स mainland India with northeastern parts of India. So then you can think of Bangladesh also as a country which is adjacent to the Siliguri corridor. All right. Now, what other state would come up here? Assam. अब हम कहाँ जा रहे हैं? मेघालय भी चले गए. और कहाँ जा रहे हैं? चलो त्रिपुरा मान लिया और मिजोरम. तो आप सभी को पता है वेस्ट बंगाल एएमटीएम है ना. वेस्ट बंगाल, आसाम, मेघालय, त्रिपुरा एंड मिजोरम. तो ये सारे जो राज्य हैं ये हमारे बॉर्डर पे हैं किसके? बांग्लादेश के साथ. नाउ व्हाट इज द एक्सटेंट ऑफ बॉर्डर दैट इंडिया शेयर्स विद बांग्लादेश? लेंथ क्या है बॉर्डर की? 4096, not 900, 96 kilometers around, round about that. So this is India's longest land boundary. Longest land boundary. ये सब चीजें आपको क्लियर होगी. Which are the states sharing borders with Bangladesh? Then it is the longest land boundary that India has. So these kind of facts are important from the perspective of preliminary examination. Right? Now you can think of Bangladesh also as a country with which we share not only a land boundary but also a maritime boundary. वहां तक हम पहुंचेंगे. But we also share certain important elements of geography. We share what? Transboundary rivers. This is Brahmaputra, this is the Ganges, and then you have Barak river also as a major river system shared with Bangladesh. There are multiple rivers that we share with Bangladesh. Around 55 rivers are shared with Bangladesh. है ना? 55 rivers are shared with Bangladesh. This is another river. If you see, Teesta. Teesta originates in the state of Sikkim, then flows through North Bengal and then northern part of West Bengal and then enters into Bangladesh and then meets the Brahmaputra stream. The Brahmaputra stream in Bangladesh is known as Jamuna. है ना? ड्रेनेज वाला चैप्टर काफी काम आ जाता है आपके. एंड द गैंजेस स्ट्रीम इन बांग्लादेश इज नोन एज पद्मा. So Ganges becomes Padma, Brahmaputra becomes Jamuna in Bangladesh. This Barak stream and other rivers make the stream known as Meghna. Meghna stream, ये Meghna stream है. So this is basically the major river system, है ना, जिसको basically GBM भी कह सकते हैं, गंगा ब्रह्मपुत्रा मेघना basin. So this is among the most important hydrological regions in the world in terms of discharge of fresh water. बहुत बड़ा, बहुत ही important hydrological region है in the world in terms of discharge of fresh water. So important resource that we share with Bangladesh. Ganges becomes Padma, Brahmaputra becomes Jamuna, Barak stream is known as Meghna. When all of them join together, the last stretches of this stream are known as Meghna. Meghna के नाम से ये last stretches of the stream flow, right? And you all know that here there is a formation of delta. So this is an important deltaic region also. Now from India's perspective, if you look at some of the locations of Bangladesh, you must remember the ports like Chittagong. ये है the Chittagong port. This is the Chittagong port. Why is Chittagong port important? Because if you look at India's northeastern states, it is not Indian ports like in Kolkata or Haldia which are close, but ports like Chittagong. This is Mizoram, close access to the Chittagong port, right? So northeastern states, if they have to be provided ease of access to the open sea, then Bangladesh is an important country. It is closest, these ports are closest. Another port is this port, Mongla port. Mongla port, this is another important port for India's uses, Mongla port. So Chittagong, जिसको चट्टोग्राम भी कहते हैं, चट्टोग्राम port and the Mongla port are important port locations from India's interest perspective in Bangladesh, right? Or please also remember that Bangladesh is another neighbor which shares a border with Myanmar. All right, so regionally also this country becomes important. एक मैप देख करके आप सिंपली खुद से 4, 5, 6, 7 पॉइंट्स बना सकते हैं. दैट इज ऑल आई एम सेइंग, rather than taking it into any level of difficulty. At the level of generality also, you can look at the map and simply answer the question, why is Bangladesh important for India? All right, so why is Bangladesh important for India? First of all, India shares its longest land boundary with Bangladesh, around 4,096 kilometers. B, India and Bangladesh also share an important maritime boundary in the Bay of Bengal. So it's also an important maritime partner for India. C, the boundary between India and Bangladesh runs through the sensitive region of northeast. The sensitive region of northeast. Most of the northeastern states are sharing borders with Bangladesh. So the sensitive region of northeast. So since the sharing of border is in this sensitive region, Bangladesh becomes a special neighbor. All right. Similarly, you can think of strategic significance of the location. So since it is adjacent to the Siliguri corridor, as we had seen in the north, the Siliguri corridor, Bangladesh is adjacent to the Siliguri corridor, which is a narrow sliver of territory. So defense of Siliguri corridor is always going to be important for India. So that also makes Bangladesh strategically important. Why? Because Bangladesh is adjacent to the Siliguri corridor. Now, what else makes Bangladesh important? Shared transboundary rivers. India and Bangladesh share 55 transboundary rivers. So this shared resource domain also makes Bangladesh an important neighbor for India. Similarly, Bangladesh's location next to Myanmar. Bangladesh also shares a border with Myanmar. So from that, what we can derive? We can say that Bangladesh is also relevant in the context of convergence of neighborhood first and Act East policies of India. In the context of Bangladesh, we can see neighborhood first as the most relevant policy framework, plus it is relevant in the context of strengthening India's Act East. दोनों policy framework को strengthen करने में Bangladesh is an important neighbor. When we are talking about Act East, we are simply referring to the fact that we share a border, maritime boundary in the Bay of Bengal, and also Bangladesh shares a border with Myanmar. So that is how it regionally also becomes important. Why else is it important? Because India and Bangladesh are commonly members of SAARC, regional organizations like SAARC and BIMSTEC. India and Bangladesh are also commonly members of SAARC and BIMSTEC. So even in the process of regional integration, Bangladesh becomes important. है ना? So simple idea, start with geography, imagine the map and start thinking why any country can be important for India. यहाँ हमने कह दिया longest land border, but this land border passes through a sensitive region of India. So managing the issues of that sensitive region, Bangladesh becomes an important partner, right? Siliguri corridor gives Bangladesh strategic significance. It is adjacent to the Siliguri corridor. We also said that there is shared resource domain, transboundary rivers, which makes Bangladesh important. Either there can be dispute or there can be cooperation, but we share the resource domain. We are also saying that when we look at India's policy formulation, Bangladesh becomes important in the neighborhood first as well as in the context of Act East policies. And when we look at the process of regional integration, what we find is Bangladesh and India are commonly members of certain organizations like SAARC, BIMSTEC, IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association, अगर आप लिस्ट बनाना चाहते हैं तो. So as an example आपको समझ में आ गया ना what we are saying. UN का भी कॉमन मेंबर है, ऐसा भी आप लिख सकते हैं अगर आप लिस्ट बनाने पे आ गए तो. UNSC में भी है, यूएनएससी में बांग्लादेश है। चलिए आगे चलिए, बात समझ में आ गई आपको। तो पहला पार्ट हमने कर लिया, व्हाई इज बांग्लादेश इंपॉर्टेंट। एनी अदर फैक्टर दैट आई मे बी मिसिंग आउट? हिस्टोरिकल एंड कल्चरल। एनीवन फ्रॉम वेस्ट बंगाल? somebody from West Bengal? Idhar. Ghotis and Bangals. These are the two categories of two cultural categories that I hear from my Bengali friends. So yes, that is very important, that India and Bangladesh share common cultural heritage. All right, India and Bangladesh share common cultural heritage. Remember I had said in the neighborhood there are two factors in favor of India. One is geography, another is culture. So यही factor तो आ रहा है यहाँ पे. India and Bangladesh share common cultural heritage. What are the examples? Commonly spoken language, Bangla. What else? Certain, of course, cuisine, clothing, ये सब चीजें आ जाएंगी culture में. But some historical figures like Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore has written the national anthem of both Bangladesh and national anthem of India. So commonly celebrated cultural figures. There is the national poet of Bangladesh, Qazi Nazrul Islam. So he is also quite well-known figure. आपको नहीं पता होगा, quite well-known figure in West Bengal at least. But you should be aware of Qazi Nazrul Islam. So these are some of the common historical figures. And then India and Bangladesh also share strong historical bonds. What does it mean? India played an important role in the birth of Bangladesh as an independent nation in 1971. So India and Bangladesh also share close historical bonds by the virtue of the fact that India played an important role in the birth of Bangladesh as an independent nation. इतने सारे पॉइंट हो गए बांग्लादेश के बारे में. Right. Now, let's simply try and make a framework of this relation. Let's try and make a framework of this relation. What will we do? We'll look at India-Bangladesh relations and try and understand in the ways in which this relationship is talked about. So we have already dealt with the factor of location. We have looked at the significance of Bangladesh as India's neighbor. All right. And now we look at this relationship. So first of all, from the perspective of historical development, how this relationship has developed, we can think of three distinct phases, three phases of this relationship. One phase is the initial phase, 1971 to 1975. Next phase is 1975 to 1991. Next phase is 1991 to the year 2000, 2001. इनिशियली इतना देख लेते हैं. उसके बाद कंटेम्प्रेरी पीरियड 2006 onwards, continuing. All right. So basically each of these phases has a certain characteristic. Generalize कर सकते हैं हम यहाँ पे. 1971 to 1975 can be called to be the period of bonhomie, to be the period of warmth in this relationship. Quite cordial relations. India is a friendly country towards Bangladesh, that is quite evident. So what had happened? When partition of India took place, it was on the basis of religion. That was one factor. Demography and religious element of demography was made factor for partition of India. The country known as Bangladesh, as we see it today, became West Pakistan, East Pakistan after partition. But West Pakistan and East Pakistan had significant differences, right? So you cannot simply make nations out of thin air. There were significant differences between West Pakistan and East Pakistan. Demographically, East Pakistan was larger as compared to West Pakistan. But politically, economically, and militarily, West Pakistan was dominant in the politics of Pakistan before 1971. Now, in Pakistan, the leadership from East Pakistan had started raising the issue of their cultural rights. So, one of the prominent leaders was Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Sheikh Mujib, as he is called sometimes. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was one of the prominent leaders of the Bengali speaking population from East Pakistan. So he raised the issue of cultural rights, primarily linguistic rights for those from East Pakistan. Pakistan, when it started state building, it basically imposed Urdu as a language, as a national language. Now Pakistan has various ethnic communities. Sindhi speaks Sindhi, Baloch speak Baloch, there is Saraiki, there is Punjabi. Now there was also at that point in time Bengali. So you cannot as easily impose an identity on a people who especially are proud of their identity. So Mujibur Rahman took the political route for the recognition of the cultural rights of Bengali speaking population. He is associated with a party called Awami League. He formed Awami League among other political parties and consistently started demanding that cultural rights of Bengalis should be acknowledged. Now, this was an easy step for Pakistan. This could have been an easy step for Pakistan, but Pakistan ऐसा कर नहीं पाया. So if you see in our neighborhood, that is something that we find why India's story is a successful story. Because we also face such challenges. We are a very diverse country, but we were able to accommodate this diversity imperfectly. बहुत ही perfect नहीं है हम लोग, खुश होने की जरूरत नहीं है, लेकिन howsoever imperfectly we were able to accommodate the diversity. One instrument was our constitution, which was flexible enough to accommodate these diversities. है ना? India also faced such problems in the 1960s, language issues. But Pakistan could not do so, could not accommodate this diversity for whatever reasons. Now, as a result, what happened was 1970, there was an election in Pakistan. Pakistan held national elections, and in that election, Awami League swept East Pakistan and thereby emerged as the largest political party and also had the majority in Pakistan's parliament. So even after winning the elections, Mr. Mujibur Rahman is not allowed to form a government because that is not liked by the West Pakistani elite. उनको पसंद नहीं आई ये बात कि भाई कोई Bengali speaking बंदा प्रधानमंत्री बनेगा. So despite winning the elections of 1970, Mr. Mujibur Rahman is not allowed to form the government. He is arrested, detained, put in jails, and after that, the approach of West Pakistani establishment towards East Pakistani people became suppressive. All right, so the rights of people from East Pakistan was suppressed. There was large-scale looting, pillage, rapes, murders of common people in East Pakistan. So the military regime in Pakistan at that point in time decided to use force. Force हर चीज का समाधान नहीं होता, ये history हमको बताता है. Now after that what happened? So from the perspective of India, early 1971 to August 1971, we see that around 1 crore refugees from East Pakistan cross over into India. They are being suppressed, so they run across to India. Now what is India doing on this particular occasion? India raised the issue. जैसा हमने कहा ना, इन्होंने कहा ह्यूमन राइट्स के लिए क्या हो रहा है, तो हमने कहा कि बातचीत हो रही है, डिस्कस हो रहा है ह्यूमन. So India raised this issue at international forums that this is a humanitarian crisis, international community should take care of it. India sent its emissaries, envoys, representatives to Western capitals to explain India's position. India said that we cannot, for the longest period, take care of the refugees because our own resources are limited. So this is a humanitarian situation. It has arisen because of the faulty policies of West Pakistani ruling establishment. So thereby, before the situation becomes further serious, international community must intervene. ऐसा नहीं हुआ. So then what we did, we basically decided, okay, we have a military option. Diplomatic option, exercise कर लिया, नहीं समाधान हुआ, तो we have a military option. So the political and military leadership met and decided that we should launch a military offensive against Pakistan, right? As the story is that the Prime Minister wanted it in the month of July, but Sam Manekshaw said that July is monsoon period, so logistics would be an issue. So ultimately, the military operation took place in the month of December 1971. 15 days of total of military excursion, and then after that, Bangladesh was created. So this is something that brought the people of Bangladesh and India closer. India basically had helped in this particular period in training the then Mukti Bahini. Now, Mukti Bahini was a sort of unorganized people's militia of the people of Bangladesh, university professors or farmers or common students picked up guns or arms to fight against the suppression of the military establishment therein. So Mukti Bahini, India helped in the creation of Mukti Bahini, India helped in training the Mukti Bahini, and Mukti Bahini and India's military fought together to oust Pakistan from Bangladesh. So Bangladesh emerged as an independent country. उसके बाद तो आप सभी को पता है क्या हुआ. जनरल नियाजी signed a instrument of surrender, आज भी हमारे पास है. 90,000 or more soldiers of Pakistan became prisoners of war. हमने उनको बहुत अच्छे से ट्रीट किया. And then after that we continued with the expectation that we would have peace with Pakistan. So Simla agreement बाद में हुआ. All right. So many people ask कि वो 90,000 सोल्जर तो पकड़ लिए थे, फिर हमने ऐसा क्यों नहीं किया, वैसा क्यों नहीं किया. इतना आसान नहीं है बार्गेन करना उस बेसिस पे. दूसरा ये है कि हमारा एक कंसर्न था कि मुजीबुर रहमान was still captured by, still under the custody of West Pakistan. So safety of Mujibur Rahman was also one of the concerns. उसके अलावा क्यों क्या नहीं किया ये मुझे नहीं पता है. But still, that is the history, that is how it happened, and we understand that India and Bangladesh have cordial relations since the very beginning. India recognized Bangladesh as an independent nation, और उस बात को कितने साल हो गए? 50 years. 2021 marked the 50 years of relations between India and Bangladesh. 50 years of birth of Bangladesh as an independent country. पिछले साल क्या हुआ? 50 साल पूरे हुए इंडिया बांग्लादेश relations के, बांग्लादेश की independence के. How did we celebrate it? 6 December we had recognized Bangladesh as an independent country, 6 December 1971. So the government decided 6 December would be celebrated as Maitri Divas. All right, 6 December was celebrated last year as Maitri Divas. Before that, in the month of March 2021, Prime Minister of India had visited Bangladesh. And in the month of December 2021, the President of India had visited Bangladesh. तो इतनी सारी चीजें हो रही थी. Hopefully आप अखबार पढ़ रहे होंगे. जहां भी थे आप अखबार पढ़ रहे थे, देख रहे थे ये हो रहा है. तो 50 साल का ये रिलेशन हो गया. So now after that particular phase where India helped Bangladesh gain independence, relations are cordial. So in this period you would find India and Bangladesh signing a treaty of friendship. Treaty of friendship is signed between India and Bangladesh. Right? So this is the first important agreement between these two sides, asserting that they value each other as close neighbors and partners. Treaty of Friendship 1972. And then they started putting in place certain mechanism to resolve their issues. So for example, in 1972, a joint rivers commission was established by these sides. So these are some of the examples through which we can say that this is a period of warmth. This is a period of cordiality. There is close consultation, close cooperation between top political leadership. India's Prime Minister of Bangladesh, President of Bangladesh, close political engagements. All right? And then this results in treaties like Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation, and then it results in the formation of certain important institutional mechanism governing the relation. For example, Joint Rivers Commission of 1972. All right? So that is what the hallmark of this period is. Now what happens is in 1975, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is assassinated. शेख मुजीबुर रहमान की हत्या कर दी जाती है. There is a military coup in Bangladesh. Certain section of Bangladeshi military revolts and then massacres the entire family of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So that's where you would see the current Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. She escaped that massacre and she was given shelter by India. भारत में आके वो रहीं. Or this is a period from after which military rule in Bangladesh started. So 1975 to 1991 is a period of in Bangladesh military rule or quasi military rule, meaning either military is directly ruling Bangladesh or even if there is a civilian government, it is for all practical purposes dependent on the military. Military and quasi-military rule exists from 1975 to 1991. Now this is a period in which there is some friction in India-Bangladesh relations. This is a period of friction. 1975 is a period of warmth. 1975 to 1991 is a period of friction in India-Bangladesh relations. One reason is the way political changes took place in Bangladesh. जैसे राजनीतिक परिवर्तन हुआ. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is assassinated and then he is replaced by a military ruler. Now, in this period, we see some examples of tensions in the form of Bangladesh trying to internationalize some of the issues. For example, the first dispute that had arisen between India and Bangladesh on river waters was the dispute on Farakka. All right, so India preferred bilateral negotiations. Bangladesh, in this particular period, initially took this issue to United Nations, which we didn't like. But ultimately, we had an agreement in 1977 on the bilateral basis. But this is an example of how and why friction emerged in this relation. And then there is 1991 to the period 1991 and period of 2000. What happens in this particular period? This is a period of democratization in Bangladesh, meaning democracy returns. Those of you who have political science as optional would recall Waves of Democracy by Samuel Huntington. That world has seen various waves of democratization. So 1990s is a period in which we would see many countries moving towards democracy. Bangladesh is also one such country. So 1991 to 2001 there is period of democratization, meaning we have elections. So in 1991 election there is a party called Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP. BNP wins the election. BNP is associated with another leader of Bangladesh called Ziaur Rahman, not Haq. Ziaul Haq was from Pakistan. So Ziaur Rahman was the military ruler at that point in time, and BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, is associated with the family of Ziaur Rahman, and the Prime Minister from BNP was the widow of Ziaur Rahman. क्या नाम है उनका? Begum Khalida Zia. So Begum Khalida Zia became the Prime Minister. And then 1991 to 1996, Begum Khalida Zia, BNP is in power. 1996 to 2000, 2001, Awami League comes to power. Who is the Prime Minister from Awami League? Sheikh Hasina, the current Prime Minister. So why have we took out this particular period? So simply to make an understanding that there is a general way of looking at this relationship wherein it is argued by many that whenever there has been an Awami League government, India-Bangladesh relations have made progress. General way of looking at it. So when BNP is in power, there has been friction. When Awami League is in power, there has been progress in the relations. ये democratic phase से हम सीख सकते हैं. This is what happened in this particular period, right? Now 2001 to 2006. अब हम transition की तरफ जा रहे हैं. 2001, 2006, what happens? 2001, 2006 is considered to be by many worst phase of India-Bangladesh relations. India-Bangladesh relations are in its worst phase. Why? क्यों ऐसा हो रहा है? Because we see that no major agreement was signed in this particular period. कोई major agreement sign नहीं हुआ इस particular period में. So there is no progress. What else do we see? There is friction on the border. There were violent clashes between BSF and their Bangladeshi counterparts on the border. तीसरा आपने क्या देखा? There is rise in insurgency in northeast and linkages across the border with the insurgency. That insurgents active in the northeastern parts of India were getting shelter in Bangladesh, were getting shelter across the border. All right, ये इसलिए हम कहते हैं कि this is the worst phase, 2001 to 2006. And who is in power? BNP is in power. So we say that because no major agreements were signed in this particular period, there were tensions on the border, violent frictions on the border, and lastly, there was a clear linkage between insurgency in northeast and the support insurgents received from across the border. तो ये तीन चीजें बहुत ही एविडेंट थी इस पर्टिकुलर फेज में, एंड दिस इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी वर्सनिंग ऑफ रिलेशंस, है ना, दैट रिलेशंस वर्सनड. 2006 onwards, Bangladesh entered into a period of turmoil. 2006 elections were pending. Opposition said that there should be a caretaker government for conducting elections. The government did not agree. So there were violent protests on the street. All right. So Bangladesh is witnessing political turmoil from 2006 to late 2007. In this particular period, elections also take place. So 2008, we see Awami League coming back to power. 2006, Awami League comes back to power, coming back to power. And since then, since 2008 till now, Awami League has been in power. So 2008 onwards, Bangladesh has witnessed a period of political stability. 2008 के बाद से बांग्लादेश में political stability का period है. In simple terms, बांग्लादेश के problems हैं, opposition के अपने आरोप हैं government के ऊपर, but generally speaking, across this decade, there has been a single party government. There has been a continuity in government. That's why we are saying that there has been political stability. So this is basically in nutshell the relationship passing through different phases. 1971 to 1975, a period of bonhomie. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is the leader of Bangladesh, and under his leadership, Treaty of Friendship is signed, Joint Rivers Commission is established. So we see that this is a period of close cooperation. 1975 to 1991, again turmoil in Bangladesh. So we can't do much about it. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman is removed from power, is assassinated. India does not like it. And military leadership of Bangladesh and Indian political leadership developed differences. So there is a period of friction, 1975 to 1991. This is a period of military rule in Bangladesh. Either military is in power directly or indirectly. 1991 is a period when democracy returns to Bangladesh. So in this period, we would see that there is a pattern which emerges wherein we generally understand that with BNP, we have periods of friction. With Awami League in power, we have periods of cooperation. 2001 to 2006, worst phase in this relationship, because A, no progress made in terms of any major agreement being signed because of violent clashes on borders, because of insurgency and its linkages across the border in Bangladesh. 2006 to 2008, this is a period of political turmoil in Bangladesh. Large scale public protests are taking place. Now, after that, 2008 onwards, Awami League has been in power consistently. So, period of political stability. Historically, तो इतना ऐसे हम समझ सकते हैं. Now, how do we look at this relationship in the current phase? Now, current phase would mean 2008 से शुरू करके आज तक का period. Why? Because we have something constant there, a stable government in Bangladesh. All right. So now understand that there are certain phrases used in newspapers, in the speeches of Prime Minister or the External Affairs Minister, which we should borrow to understand any relationship. So the Prime Minister of India, in his speech last year and also a year before that, had said that India-Bangladesh relations are passing through a golden chapter. They are witnessing, these relations are witnessing a golden chapter, Sonali Adhyay. That this relationship is witnessing a Sonali Adhyay or a golden chapter. All right. Sometimes the official documents refer to this relationship as fraternal friendship, that we are like siblings. We are more than friends. We are not only friends, we are more than friends. We are like siblings. Fraternal friendship. This is what the relationship is. So we can say that in the current phase, the fraternal friendship between India and Bangladesh is witnessing a golden chapter. In the current phase, the fraternal friendship between India and Bangladesh is witnessing a golden chapter. जब मैं कोई लाइन दोहरा रहा हूं तो मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप लिख लेंगे उसको, और अगर आप वो नहीं लिखना चाहते तो कम से कम समझ लेंगे कि this is the reference in the current phase to the relationship. Prime Minister says the relationship is witnessing a golden chapter. The relationship is referred to as fraternal friendship, that we are more than friends. We are like siblings. Now, let's try and understand why this is so. So, to basically make a framework of this relationship. Relationship को title ये दे सकते हैं, इस रिश्ते को ये नाम दे सकते हैं. अब क्या है इसका मतलब? क्या है इसका मतलब? Golden chapter का मतलब क्या होता है? So, in simple terms, you can make a question out of it. In recent times, the India-Bangladesh relations, in recent times, the India-Bangladesh relations are said to be passing through a golden chapter. Discuss with adequate examples. Discuss with adequate examples. है ना? So, देखो, this is basically what the nature of questions generally is. The statements that you read in the beginning of any question in UPSC examination is an opinion about the relationship. It's a view on the relationship. For example, वो पाकिस्तान का क्वेश्चन आपको याद होगा, mutual distrust and terrorism and mutual distrust have clouded India-Pakistan relations. Can anyone deny it कि ऐसा है? नहीं, it's a statement of truth. So basically that's an opinion about the relationship. So this is what it is also. In recent times, India-Bangladesh relations are said to be passing through a golden chapter. Discuss with adequate examples. Now what are you supposed to do? You have to clarify the meaning of it. Why? ऐसा क्यों कहा जाता है? You have to give examples from different phases. So thereby इसका आंसर बहुत ही सिंपल है. One, close and regular political interactions at the highest level, पहला तो ये हुआ है in this particular period. So basically this is political aspect of this relationship. What does this mean? अभी आप अगर अपना मटेरियल देखो तो उसमें दिया हुआ है ना कि इस साल में प्राइम मिनिस्टर वहां गए, इस साल में, है ना, शुरुआत में दिया हुआ है शेख हसीना केम टू इंडिया, प्राइम मिनिस्टर मनमोहन सिंह वेंट टू बांग्लादेश, प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी वेंट टू बांग्लादेश, है ना. दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ इट. उस चीज का मतलब ये आपको वो याद नहीं करना होता है कि कौन कब कहां गया. इफ यू सी दैट the political interactions at the highest level are frequent, you understand political health of relationship is good, है ना. अगर मीटिंग्स हो रही हैं लगातार, बातचीत हो रही है लगातार, इसका मतलब क्या है? Politically the relationship is strong. So A, we can say that this is a golden phase because there has been close and regular political interactions at the highest level. Prime ministers or presidents meeting each other, है ना. कोई भी विजिट हो रही हो, अगर आपको दिख रहा है कि रेगुलर है तो आप ये पॉइंट यूज कर सकते हैं किसी भी रिलेशन में. इंडिया बांग्लादेश रिलेशन में ऐसा तो हुआ है, मैंने आपको 2 एग्जांपल दे दिए. लास्ट ईयर प्राइम मिनिस्टर वाज इन बांग्लादेश एंड प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया वाज आल्सो इन बांग्लादेश. सो दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ इट. सेकेंडली वी कैन से दैट multiple contentious issues have been resolved in this period. Multiple contentious issues have been resolved in this period. अब जब आप ऐसा लिख रहे हैं तो थोड़ा सा एग्जाम्पल दे दें. फॉर एग्जाम्पल यहां भी दे सकते थे एग्जाम्पल, अपना दिमाग इस्तेमाल करके, डिपेंडिंग ऑन वेयर द एग्जाम्पल वुड बी मोर इफेक्टिव, मोस्ट इफेक्टिव, ऐसा आप कोशिश करें. कॉन्टेंशियस इश्यूज हैव बीन रिजॉल्व. व्हाट काइंड ऑफ इश्यूज? व्हाट काइंड ऑफ इश्यूज? हाँ, रिवर वाटर कोई कह रहा है, कोई कुछ और कह रहा है. हाँ, so basically implementation of land boundary agreement in 2015 is one example. Maritime boundary agreement in 2014 is another example. India and Bangladesh resolved their land boundary issues as well as demarcated their maritime boundary in this period, in recent times, 2014, 2015. Okay. So basically ये दूसरा कारण हो सकता है जिसकी वजह से हम कह रहे हैं कि multiple contentious issues have been resolved in this period. That's why this period is referred to as the period of golden chapter. What else has happened? Progress in traditional areas of cooperation. Progress in traditional areas of cooperation. That in this period, what we witness is adequate progress has been made in traditional areas of cooperation. यहाँ पे भी दे दीजिए example. For example, क्या example? अभी कोई trade कह रहा था. For example, trade between India and Bangladesh crossed the figure of $10 billion. 10 billion US dollars. Trade figure has touched in this particular period. So that is the third reason why this is called, referred to as, or it would be right to refer to it as golden chapter. 3 कारण हमने दे दिए, और कोई कारण देने की जरूरत है? In this period we witness enhanced development cooperation. In what form? For example, India in the recent years has extended $8 billion US dollars worth of line of credit. यहाँ LOC का मतलब line of credit है, line of control नहीं, line of credit. So India has extended $8 billion US dollars of line of credit to Bangladesh. That is the highest line of credit offered by India to any सिंगल कंट्री, किसी भी एक सिंगल देश को जो मदद की है हमने, वो मयंक सेज द मटेरियल आउटडेटेड, हाउ टू कवर देन? मटेरियल पढ़िए और क्लास को फॉलो कीजिए। जहां पे भी एडिशन करना है किसी चीज का, मैं एडिशन करा रहा हूं आपको, है ना, मटेरियल पढ़िए और साथ में एडिशन करते रहिए। मटेरियल आपको फ्रेमवर्क देता है, हिस्टोरिकल बैकग्राउंड देता है और बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़ें चेंज नहीं हो जाती हैं। थोड़ा सा डेटा सेट नया आता है, उससे ज़्यादा बहुत ज़्यादा चीज़ें चेंज नहीं होती। कुछ मेजर अगर हुआ हो किसी रिलेशनशिप में, तो आई विल कीप ऑन एडिंग इट, एंड I would also be providing some handouts to you, so don't worry about that, right? So $8 billion of line of credit has been provided by India to Bangladesh. So we have seen what? Important development, enhanced development cooperation between India and Bangladesh. Similarly, we see defense cooperation making progress, right? So, for example, India and Bangladesh constituted CORPAT. CORPAT is Coordinated Patrol as their maritime exercise. All right, as their maritime exercise. What is the military exercise between India and Bangladesh called? ये तो maritime exercise हो गया. Sampriti military exercises have been conducted fairly regularly in recent period. So this is another way in which we can say that this relationship is witnessing a golden period. Similarly, we will find in this particular period there has been a focus on connectivity projects. Focus on connectivity projects, meaning apart from progress in traditional areas of cooperation, there has also been an addition of newer areas of cooperation. Connectivity has been a focus. For example, linking of waterways. India is dredging the rivers in Bangladesh. Bangladesh के रिवर चैनल इंडिया अपने पैसे से ड्रेज कर रहा है, नेविगेबल बना रहा है. सो लिंकिंग ऑफ वाटरवेज इज वन आइडिया. Another idea is linking of railway network, linking of railway network. These kind of projects have been going on between India and Bangladesh in recent times. इसके अलावा क्या हुआ है? इसके अलावा क्या हुआ है? हाँ, कोऑपरेशन. ये मास्क से किस पीछे से बोल रहे हैं आप बोल रहे हैं. दो लोग मास्क वाले हैं, मुझे समझ में नहीं आया कौन बोल रहा है. कोऑपरेशन इन इंटरनेशनल ग्रुपिंग्स, चलिए वो भी हुआ है, वो भी मान लेंगे हम. लेकिन इसके अलावा हाँ, स्कॉलरशिप दी है किसको? बांग्लादेश स्टूडेंट्स को. सो लेट्स मेक दिस पॉइंट, स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ people to people ties. लोगों को क्यों भूल जा रहे हैं? स्कॉलरशिप आपने दिया है. people to people ties. One example is highest number of visas issued to people from, highest number of visas किनको दिया हमने? पीपल फ्रॉम बांग्लादेश. चलो लिस्ट बना ली हमने. इसके अलावा कुछ और फॉर्म्स ऑफ कोऑपरेशन है. नहीं, वो इस फेज की बात नहीं है, वो तो काफी पहले से है. ड्यूटी फ्री एक्सेस. नाउ एक मिनट. एक साथ इतने सारे लोग बोलेंगे तो मुझे समझ में नहीं आ रहा है कुछ भी. आप हाथ ऊंचा कीजिए और बोलिए, और मैं अपना पॉइंट ही भूल जा रहा हूं. ये मुझे क्या बताना है आपको. तो इसके अलावा कुछ नए एरियाज ऑफ कोऑपरेशन जो है हमने देखा कहां पे है. देयर इज अ पावर प्लांट दैट बांग्लादेश इज बिल्डिंग. इट इज कॉल्ड रूपपुर nuclear power plant, Rupur nuclear power plant. So Rupur nuclear power plant is first nuclear power plant that Bangladesh is building, and Russia is providing the major technological support. It is based on Russian technology, and India is also involved in helping Bangladesh setting up this power plant. Rupur nuclear power plant is an example of cooperation in the area of energy, right? तो इतना काफी है ये प्रूव करने के लिए कि दिस इज गोल्डन चैप्टर. दैट इज बेसिकली द पर्पस ऑफ questions of this nature. This is basically asking you to tell the examiner what do you know about it, why this relationship is said to be in golden chapter. क्या हुआ है? तो फिर से दोहरा लेते हैं क्या हुआ है. In recent times, India-Bangladesh relations have been referred to be passing through golden chapter because A, क्या हुआ है? There has been close and regular interaction at the highest political level. उसके अलावा क्या हुआ है? Through this kind of an interaction, dialogue, what has happened is we have been able to resolve multiple contentious issues, most importantly issues of boundary, land and maritime. Progress in traditional areas of cooperation, for example, trade has crossed $10 billion US of figure. Then we see progress in terms of ये इकोनॉमिक एग्जाम्पल है, आप नेचर समझ सकते हैं कोऑपरेशन का. इनहांस डेवलपमेंट कोऑपरेशन, $8 billion US of line of credit issued by India to Bangladesh. Then defense cooperation also has seen some progress. For example, Corpet has been instituted as a maritime exercise, and Sampriti military exercises have been conducted fairly regularly. Focus on connectivity is another hallmark of this particular period, where there some examples are linking of waterways, which is ongoing, and linking of railway network. But बहुत सारे example हैं connectivity में, केवल ये दो example नहीं है. लेकिन एग्जाम में आप सब कुछ नहीं लिखते हैं. इंडिकेटिव और मोस्ट इफेक्टिव आंसर लिखने के लिए आप मोस्ट इफेक्टिव एग्जाम्पल्स यूज करते हैं. स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ पीपल टू पीपल टाइज हैज ऑल्सो बीन अ फीचर ऑफ दिस फेज. इसमें हम क्या कह सकते हैं? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, देर हैज बीन एन इंक्रीज इन द नंबर ऑफ पीपल ऑफ बांग्लादेश ट्रैवलिंग टू इंडिया. वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट लीगली. हमने सबसे ज्यादा वीजा किसको इशू करता है इंडिया हर साल? People from Bangladesh. And then we also see that some newer forms of cooperation. For example, Bangladesh is constructing its first nuclear power plant. Kahan? Where? Rupur. So there India is also involved in the implementation of this project, Rupur nuclear power plant. India is part of implementing this particular project. So these are the reasons why we can say this relationship is going through a golden chapter. You, if you want, can then, as part of discussion, move to the next part. You can talk about the scope. COVID भी आप example use कर सकते हैं, मैं मना नहीं कर रहा हूँ. That India has provided vaccination, free vaccination as a gift to Bangladesh. आप लिख सकते हैं, बिल्कुल लिख सकते हैं. वो भी recent, तो वही कह रहा हूँ, recent example है. बट हर चीज किस चीज का एग्जाम्पल है? हाउ दिस रिलेशनशिप हैज मूव्ड फ्रॉम स्ट्रेंथ टू स्ट्रेंथ. सो व्हाट इज बेसिकली द लिमिटेशन इन दिस रिलेशनशिप? सब अच्छा ही चल रहा है क्या? तो देन व्हेन यू आर डिस्कसिंग, यू कैन ब्रीफली ड्वेल ऑन व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम इन दिस रिलेशनशिप. व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम इन दिस रिलेशनशिप? इश्यूज ऑफ river water like Teesta remain unresolved. Issues of river waters like Teesta river dispute remains unresolved. All right, Teesta issue remains unresolved. Defense cooperation is low key. यानी कि डिफेंस इज वन एरिया ऑफ कोऑपरेशन वेयर देयर इज अ स्कोप फॉर improvement. Defense cooperation remains low key. We have some examples where corporate has been established, we have some Preeti exercises taking place, but we don't see comprehensive defense cooperation between India and Bangladesh. So defense cooperation remains low key. What else? Political issues at times have clouded the public opinion, has clouded the public opinion on the relations. What does this mean? CAA, NRC, this was a phase in which government proposed a policy framework. In India, there was domestic opposition. In some of the Bangladeshi newspapers also, it was published that it would affect India-Bangladesh relations. So these are political issues which are covered by news media in different ways, and sometimes it creates an issue of perception. Perception का problem हो जाता है कभी-कभी, but officially the answer has been, External Affairs Minister from India has said, or ministers from Bangladesh have said, that CAA and NRC remain domestic issues of India and they would not affect India-Bangladesh relations. But कभी-कभी आप क्या बोल रहे होते हैं, आप क्या कह रहे होते हैं, क्या disputes हो रहे हैं दोनों साइड पे, इसका public perception of the relation पे असर पड़ता है कि नहीं पड़ता है? इलीगल माइग्रेशन की बात ले लें आप, CAA NRC की बात ले लें आप, तो जिस तरह से अखबारों में बांग्लादेश में लिखा जा रहा है, जिस तरह से इंडिया में कई एक्सपर्ट्स लिखते हैं, तो एक ओपिनियन ये होती है कि इट वुड नेगेटिवली इफेक्ट इंडिया बांग्लादेश रिलेशंस. उसको हमने ऐसे लिखा है, पॉलिटिकल इश्यूज एट टाइम्स हैव क्लाउडेड द पब्लिक ओपिनियन ऑन द रिलेशन. पब्लिक ओपिनियन, और आप कह सकते हैं परसेप्शन. परसेप्शन मैनेज करना बहुत जरूरी है ना? बोर्ड को दिखाना है कि आप तैयार हैं IAS बनने के लिए, IFS बनने के लिए. परसेप्शन मैनेज करना जरूरी है. एग्जामिनर को आपको दिखाना है मेन सी कॉपी में दैट यू आर अ प्रिपेयर्ड, वेल प्रिपेयर्ड स्टूडेंट. चलिए, जो भी है ये. इसके अलावा इंक्रीज्ड इंटरेस्ट ऑफ चाइना, increased interest of China in Bangladesh, or increasing interest of China in Bangladesh, has been a source of concern for India, has been a source of concern for India. Meaning, China's investment in Bangladesh has been increasing, China's political interest in Bangladesh has been increasing, and this is of concern to India. The China factor, China coming in our backyard, जैसे किसी ने पूछा था चैट बॉक्स में भी, राइट? सो ये बेसिकली क्या हो गया? स्कोप, एरियाज वेयर प्रोग्रेस नीड्स टू बी मेड, नॉट नेसेसरली अ क्राइसिस, not necessarily a make and break situation, but a situation which requires either adequate attention or progress has not been satisfactory. तो यहां पे हमको और काम करने की जरूरत है. इसलिए यहां पे हमने क्या कहा, क्या स्कोप है इस रिलेशनशिप में, किन चीजों में स्कोप बचा हुआ है काम करने का, या लिमिटेशंस इसी को कह लेंगे. क्या लिमिटेशंस आपको दिखते हैं इस रिलेशनशिप में, या आप क्या कहेंगे, चैलेंजेस. ये भी हमने आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया मेजरली क्या चैलेंजेस हैं. नाउ व्हाट रिमेन्स टू बी डन, अब आपको क्या बताना है? वे फॉरवर्ड. वे फॉरवर्ड का मतलब क्या हुआ? बड़ी बड़ी सब हेडिंग में आप लोग लिखते हैं वे फॉरवर्ड. हर आंसर में जरूरी नहीं कि आप इतना बड़ा बड़ा वे फॉरवर्ड लिखें, है ना? बट then how do we summarize this relationship? क्या करना चाहिए हमको? First of all, focus needs to be on an adequate management of trans-boundary rivers. Meaning most of the people would agree that India-Bangladesh relations, if it has to make further progress, requires a focus on managing the issues of water, because water issues are persistent issues in this relationship. For that, we need to find a framework. Similarly, we need to understand that in terms of enhancing cooperation, it has been argued that India and Bangladesh need to enter into a comprehensive defense agreement. Comprehensive defense agreement or comprehensive defense cooperation agreement, which simply means provide us a institutional basis for closer security and defense cooperation. In the past, it has been in news that India and Bangladesh are considering signing a comprehensive defense cooperation agreement. इसलिए इस point को include कर लिया, that this is one thing which remains to be done in this relationship, that we need to have a comprehensive agreement on defense cooperation, defining the scope of defense cooperation between these sides. Thirdly, where should be the focus? Implementation of connectivity projects, in a time-bound manner. So basically, if you are able to implement your projects in a time-bound manner, if they are efficient, they are fulfilling the needs of Bangladesh, so thereby you are also in a sense negating the advantages that China may have because of its larger investments. हमको क्या करना है? If we have identified any projects, we must implement them in good time. क्योंकि सबसे बड़ी शिकायत इंडिया के साथ क्या है? That we over promise and under deliver. We are very good at words. वो बात करने में बहुत अच्छे हैं. But when it comes to implementation, we lag behind. Domestically भी हम ऐसा देखते हैं कि प्लान और स्कीम तो बहुत बढ़िया है, बट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन में थोड़ी सी गड़बड़ी है. तो दैट इज व्हाट वी आर सेइंग, दैट वी शुड इम्प्लीमेंट थिंग्स, वी शुड फोकस on implementation. It would enhance our credibility. And then India needs to leverage culture and geography to remain Bangladesh's first choice as an international, to remain Bangladesh's first choice as an international partner. तो क्या करना है हमको? We must leverage geography and culture. What does it mean? It simply means that if you look at China, China does not share a border with Bangladesh. We share a border with Bangladesh. So leveraging geography means enhance border infrastructure, enhance connectivity across the border, more number of bus services, more number of railway services, है ना? जितना बांग्लादेश और बांग्लादेशी people look at India as a friend, that is advantageous to us. All right, there would always be issues of discord, और वो आपके ऊपर है कि आप डिस्कॉर्ड के इश्यूज को कितना इंपॉर्टेंस देते हैं, कि हमारा झगड़ा ही झगड़ा है या फिर हमारे पास ज्यादा कॉमनैलिटी है. झगड़े के इश्यूज हमेशा रहेंगे, हर किसी के साथ रहेंगे, पर ये आपके ऊपर है कि आप कोऑपरेशन को ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंस देते हैं या फिर कॉन्टेंशन को. सो दिस इज समथिंग दैट वी हैव टू लीवरेज. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, providing more scholarships to students from Bangladesh is one way of leveraging culture. Celebrating 50 years of India-Bangladesh relations, Maitri Divas, issuing postage stamps commemorating common historical figures like Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, like Mahatma Gandhi. So, 100th birth anniversary of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman and 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and 75th year of India's independence, they fell in close proximity. So India and Bangladesh commemorated these occasions together. ये मतलब है इसका. आपका example सही है. So this is something that we should be doing. Similarly, this year, Bangladesh honored Mukti Jodhas, meaning those from Indian armed forces who were active in fighting in Bangladesh wars. उनको सम्मानित किया. हमने किसको सम्मानित किया? People from Mukti Bahini, right? Sometimes you would see Padma awards have also been given to foreigners, including people from Bangladesh. This is what the meaning of culture is. Kolkata अच्छा लगता है उनको. We should welcome them. Our hospitals are good. We should welcome them. है ना? लीगल इमिग्रेशन, मैनेजेबल इमिग्रेशन को जितना हम प्रमोट कर सकते हैं करना चाहिए एज एन एलिमेंट ऑफ पीपल टू पीपल टाइज. All right, so this is something that we should be doing, and ultimately there is a need to insulate. Insulate what? Insulate bilateral relations from domestic political contentions. There is a need to insulate bilateral relations from domestic political contentions. Political party A, political party B may have different opinions, but ultimately relations are at the level of state. है ना? Political parties के बीच में relation नहीं है. It is between state and people. So if we see that there may be issues of discord, there may be political differences. India में कुछ होता है तो वहाँ पे कुछ लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगेगा. वहाँ कुछ होता है तो यहाँ पे हम में से कुछ लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगेगा. Which is not to say that this is not important, but this is not everything about the relationship. सब कुछ नहीं है relationship में ये. So basically we need to insulate bilateral relations, institutional cooperation from domestic political contention. ये तो डेमोक्रेसी में होता रहेगा. Political parties power में आती रहेंगी, जाती रहेंगी. There would be different issues, but relationship is vital. Location of Bangladesh is vital. Our purposes for which Bangladesh is important is permanent. है ना? So that's why we need to insulate the relations from domestic bilateral contentions. काफी लोग commotion मचाने लगे हैं तो break का समय हो गया, मैं समझ गया. I can hear the commotion. So here is a break. After the break, please come back. If you have any questions, we'll take them up. And then now we would start taking up issues in India-Bangladesh relations. All right, what are the issues in India-Bangladesh relations? Chaliye, hopefully all of you are now ready to move forward. थकान तो नहीं हो रही? और कोई जरूरत तो नहीं है कि कोई चुटकुला सुनाया जाए? मैं तो नहीं सुना सकता, आप आगे सुना सकते हैं अगर आपको सुनाना हो तो. आप में से किसी का मन हो तो मैं आपको माइक देने को तैयार हूं. खैर, टेक योर सीट्स, टेक योर सीट्स, टेक योर सीट्स when we are talking about India-Bangladesh relations and we are talking about major issues. So basically this is another way of reading any relationship. We identify what are the major issues in any relation. ये एक और तरीका है किसी भी रिलेशन को पढ़ने का. जनरली क्या इश्यूज हैं, क्या लेवल्स ऑफ इंटरेक्शन है बिटवीन एनी टू कंट्रीज. सो जनरली फॉर द ईज ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग ये क्लासिफिकेशन आप यूज कर सकते हैं, है ना? बिकॉज देयर वुड बी अ लॉट ऑफ एग्रीमेंट्स बिटवीन कंट्रीज. क्या सारे एग्रीमेंट्स याद करना है एग्जाम के लिए? नहीं. ईच ऑफ द एग्रीमेंट्स इज एन एग्जाम्पल ऑफ एनी पर्टिकुलर एरिया ऑफ कोऑपरेशन. किसी एक पर्टिकुलर एरिया में कोऑपरेशन का एग्जाम्पल है जो एग्रीमेंट साइन हो रहे हैं. ओनली major agreements, something which has happened for the first time and something which is very important. ये आपको कैसे पता चलेगा? ये आपको ऐसे पता चलेगा कि जब कोई चीज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है तो वो लगातार अखबार में आएगी, है ना? इसके अलावा hundreds of agreements are signed. So you should be concerned with most important ones, something which is happening for the first time, something which is being covered in the newspaper regularly, ऐसे agreements के बारे में. But generally all the agreements would be an example of any area of cooperation. So when we look at the issues between India and Bangladesh, we traditionally look at them as issues of borders, right? Number one, issues of borders. Number two, the issue of water. Number three, the issue area of economic cooperation. Number four, the area of connectivity. And lastly, other strategic issues, for example defense, for example चाइना फैक्टर. अभी बहुत सारे लोग जैसे कहते हैं कि रोहिंग्या इशू जो है इंडिया बांग्लादेश के बीच में इशू है, बहुत सारे लोगों ने एग्जांपल दिया, बट यू फेल टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट द इशू ऑफ रोहिंग्या इज नॉट अ बायलैटरल इशू बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश, है ना. डायरेक्टली इंडिया और बांग्लादेश से रिलेटेड इशू नहीं है वो. रोहिंग्याज आर फ्रॉम म्यांमार. Bangladesh has a large number of Rohingyas as refugees. Bangladesh expects India to impress upon Myanmar for the solution of the issue. तो बांग्लादेश जो है बेसिकली इंडिया से एक्सपेक्ट करता है कि इंडिया उसकी मदद करेगा. ये इशू इंडिया और बांग्लादेश का नहीं है. आपको बहुत ही अट्रैक्टिव लगता है, लेकिन ये इशू इंडिया और बांग्लादेश के बीच का बायलैटरल इशू नहीं है. ऑलराइट. So basically majorly the issues revolve around these areas. One is borders, another is water, another is economic cooperation, then now newer focus on connectivity, and then you can lastly look at the larger strategic issues, defense cooperation or the China factor. Let's start taking up these issues one by one. One, if you look at the issue of border, we have already noted down the basic fact that with 4096 kilometers of shared boundary, this is the largest land boundary that India has, right? So the basics of anything are always useful. Longest land boundary to start. Now the nature of this particular boundary is porous, all right? For example, on many places it's a riverine boundary. On many places it is made difficult by forests and hills. So the terrain makes this boundary porous, meaning naturally it is easier to cross over from one side to the other side. आप boundary तो पूरी बंद नहीं कर सकते. So generally it was a porous boundary, longest land border. Thirdly, we understand that it has been a sensitive boundary. In what context? In simple context of insurgency in the northeastern states. Insurgency in the northeastern states. Similarly, this is a sensitive boundary when it comes to other issues. For example, when managing issues like drug trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking, cattle trafficking, unscrupulous elements, antisocial elements, criminal elements have been using this border in the past. So that's why it is intrinsically related with national security also. But apart from that, what was the basic issue in this boundary relation? So the basic issue in this boundary relation was the demarcation of boundaries. For a very long time, demarcation of boundaries plus the issue of enclaves plus the issue of adverse possessions. These three were the traditional issues in this relationship, that in some sectors the boundary had never been marked. So there was a dispute where exactly is the boundary between India and Bangladesh in these sectors. Around 6.1 kilometers was the length of such areas. All right. Now there were certain peculiar features like enclaves, which made demarcation of boundary or satisfactory demarcation of boundary difficult. So what is an enclave? Enclave is a piece of territory belonging to one country surrounded on all sides, by another country. All right. So this is basically, when we hear the idea of enclave, imagine it is as a territory which belongs to one country, but it is surrounded on all sides by the territory of another country. है ना? So basically, if you imagine this as the border, this side is India, this side is Bangladesh. All right. So you have villages, land parcels which look like this. This is a Bangladeshi enclave in India surrounded by Indian territory. This is an Indian enclave in Bangladesh surrounded by Bangladeshi territory. So if you have to go to your own country from here, you are crossing an international border. All right. So basically, people from these territories, these enclaves, were living a very difficult life in terms of access to basic amenities, because they were far away from their own country. So this is a peculiar situation that existed in India-Bangladesh border. There are various enclaves in different parts of the world, but this was important in the context of India-Bangladesh border. क्या कहानी है? So many people argue that before partition, the ruler of Cooch Behar and the ruler of Rangpur, which is in Bangladesh, the Nawab of Rangpur and the Raja of Cooch Behar, were playing some game, chess type का, रोपड़ चौपड़ जो भी game होता है उस type का, and they bet territories as part of that game कि तुम जीते तो ये गांव तुम्हारा और मैं जीता तो ये गांव तुम्हारा. Basically, लोगों के अपने नवाबी शौक. So then in that context, some territories which belonged to the ruler of Cooch Behar, which was in India, went to the ruler of Rangpur. Rangpur ultimately went to Bangladesh. All right. And similarly, some territories which belonged to the ruler of Rangpur came to the ruler of Cooch Behar. Partition हो गया. Partition के बाद राजा नवाब टेरिटरी का मामला खत्म हो गया, लेकिन the situation of these territories remained peculiar because there was no specific agreement as to the status of these territories. Right? Ultimately, they belonged to either Cooch Behar or Rangpur, but when partition happened, they fell on the sides of either sovereign state of India or sovereign state of Pakistan. दोनों ने कहा कि हम बात नहीं करते, बहुत लंबे समय तक बातचीत नहीं हुई, ये सिचुएशन कंटिन्यू होती रही. When Bangladesh was created, what happened was India and Bangladesh signed a land boundary agreement. Land boundary agreement was signed between India and Bangladesh. 1974, Bangladesh ratified this agreement. बांग्लादेश की पार्लियामेंट ने रेटिफाई कर दिया इस एग्रीमेंट को, इससे संबंधित कानून पास कर दिया. So Bangladesh said that we have completed the formality. India had signed this agreement, but India fell short of ratifying this agreement. Why? Because when India was in the process of ratifying this agreement, by that time the government in Bangladesh changed, right? So military came to power in Bangladesh. So that became one issue of contention. Another issue of contention was border with Bangladesh is shared by different states in India. So West Bengal has had its own objections. Assam had its own objections. So the federal nature of polity and lack of consensus among important states in terms of exchange of territory became a contentious issue. So one is the political changes in Bangladesh, another is lack of consensus on the compromise among Indian states. So this is why India did not ratify this agreement, and this issue remained an issue of contention. So sometimes if you would see in polity, I hope you have heard of these cases. Berubari Union case, all right, or sometimes you have part-time arrangements where India provided a corridor for connecting some enclaves of Bangladesh with the mainland Bangladesh, 3 Bigha corridor, those kind of issues. Those were stop-gap arrangements. Now finally in 2015 India ratified the agreement, meaning a constitutional amendment was passed approving the proposed changes in territory under the land boundary agreement. है ना? So for example, you know that if India has to cede any territory, it is a subject of constitutional amendment. तो ये process India में पूरा नहीं हुआ था because domestic contention continues, right? Lack of consensus remained. So by 2015 India ratified the land boundary agreement. So what happened now? इस चीज का solution कैसे हुआ? As is where is basis, है ना? आप ये गांव उठा करके इधर तो ला नहीं सकते और ये गांव उठा के उधर तो ले जा नहीं सकते. सबसे आसान सॉल्यूशन क्या है? जो जहां है उसको वहीं पे रहने दो. All right, so it basically meant that both sides agreed that now they don't have any issue pertaining to enclaves. So around a total of 111, 162 enclaves were exchanged. 111 India's enclaves in Bangladesh, 51 Bangladesh's enclaves in India. ऐसे 162 enclaves थे जिनको एक्सचेंज कर लिया गया. ये मान लिया गया कि इन पे अब कोई विवाद नहीं है. The population living in these enclaves were given an option of either staying in India or going to Bangladesh, or either staying in Bangladesh or going to India. So now you understand that जो जहां रहता हुआ आया है वो वहीं रहना चाहता है. People don't want to be displaced. People just don't want to be displaced. So around 900 people chose to leave their places or their places of residence and change their nationalities. All right. So minimal population transfer took place, but generally the idea was that the territory, the enclave, if it falls within India, that now is of India, belongs to India, and if the enclave is in Bangladesh, that enclave belongs to Bangladesh. तो ऐसे हमने ये तय किया कि we have exchanged enclaves, and by 2015 we said that we have resolved the issues of enclaves. 111 enclaves handed over to Bangladesh, 51 enclaves handed over to India. तो ऐसा हमने एग्रीमेंट में मान लिया और ऐसे ये इशू रिजॉल्व हो गया. तो अब ऐसा नहीं है कि भाई टेरिटरी का क्वेश्चन रह गया. पहले तो ये जमीन का क्वेश्चन था कि भाई किसकी जमीन, और जब तक ये जमीन का क्वेश्चन तय नहीं होता तो हम बाउंड्री कैसे डिमार्केट कर लें. सो नाउ देयर इज नो टेरिटोरियल इशू इन्वॉल्व. सिमिलरली इफ यू लुक एट द आइडिया ऑफ एडवर्स पोजीशन, कोई लॉयर है क्लास में? एनीवन फ्रॉम अ लॉ बैकग्राउंड? कोई लॉयर नहीं है क्लास में? इतनी बड़ी क्लास में कोई लॉयर नहीं है? कोई एलएलबी कर रहा हो? So in law, if you look at property law, you have the idea of ownership and you have the idea of possession, है ना? Ownership is one thing, you have the land deed, जमीन आपके नाम पे, प्रॉपर्टी आपकी है, पर इसका मतलब क्या है कि सचमुच में आपकी है? देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड पोजेशन, है ना। इंडियन कोर्ट्स में जाओगे, सिविल मामलों में जमीन के मामले बहुत चल रहे होते हैं, उसमें अधिकतर मामले यही होते हैं कि जमीन किसी और के नाम पे है लेकिन है किसी और के कब्जे में। मैं इतने साल से इस जमीन पे रह रहा हूं, है ना। तो बेसिकली दैट हैज वैल्यू। सो एडवर्स पोजेशन मीन्स दैट द टाइटल ऑफ द लैंड बिलोंग्स टू वन पर्सन बट द एक्चुअल पोजेशन ऑफ द लैंड इज विथ अनदर पर्सन। कोर्ट में जाओगे तो केवल जमीन के कागज दिखाने से नहीं हो जाएगा, यू हैव टू एडिक्वेटली प्रूव पोजेशन एज वेल, कि भैया यू हैव possessed this land. So basically this is a scenario where in the title of the land belongs to one person and the possession of the land is with another person, in simple terms. So there were some land parcels close to the border wherein the land belonged to person of one country and it was adversely situated across the border, meaning it was under the possession of another country, है ना। So this is India, this is Bangladesh. So basically this is about who possesses the land and who has the ownership of land. So basically these were land parcels close to the border area. यहाँ पे आप देख रहे हैं कि border से दूर और completely surrounded by another country. So adverse possession was about property's ownership and property's possession. So adverse possession was also considered or resolved through exchange. Adverse possessions were adequately exchanged. So now there were no issues of land between India and Bangladesh after ratification of the 2015 ratification of the land boundary agreement. And the land boundary agreement also said that in 3 sectors, around 6.1 kilometer of boundary, and this was mainly riverine boundary. There are rivers and rivulets on the border and generally difficult to demarcate these kind of regions, so they were not demarcated at all. After the land boundary agreement, around 6.1 kilometer, 3 sectors of boundary was demarcated. And this is how India and Bangladesh resolved the land boundary agreement. This is how India and Bangladesh resolved the land boundary agreement. Now, yes, Sharanveer has said 111 to Bangladesh, 51 to India. Good. It is as though you are repeating what I am saying. Good. So now we understand what has happened in land boundary agreement. So let's simply do a write-up on this. थोड़ा सा लिख लेते हैं. थ्रो लाइट ऑन, क्वेश्चन लिखते हैं. थ्रो लाइट ऑन. The resolution of land boundary issue between India. Throw light on the important aspects of, the resolution of land boundary issue between India and Bangladesh. The resolution of land boundary issue between India and Bangladesh. India and Bangladesh. What is the larger significance? What is the larger significance of this development? What is the larger significance of this development? So first of all, what is the first part asking you to do? So जिनका कहना है कि भाई the material has become outdated, this is something that is not going to change. ये तो हो गया, तो ये तो है मटेरियल में, तो ये तो आप पढ़ लें कम से कम. Now the first part simply tells you, factually describe हाउ द लैंड बाउंड्री इशू हैज बीन रिजॉल्व बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश। समझ में आ गई आपको बात? दूसरा पार्ट क्या कह रहा है कि थोड़ा सा अपना दिमाग लगाइए और एनालाइज कीजिए कि इसका क्या इंपॉर्टेंस हो सकता है ना। तो पहले पार्ट में जितना फैक्चुअल रह सकते हैं उतना अच्छा है। दूसरे पार्ट में क्या है, थोड़ा आपको क्रिएटिविटी का मौका मिल रहा है। सो व्हाट विल यू राइट इन द फर्स्ट पार्ट? इंडिया शेयर्स इट्स लॉन्गेस्ट लैंड बाउंड्री। लोग कहते हैं ना कैसे शुरुआत करें आईआर में, समझ में नहीं आ रहा, यहां ज्योग्राफी से शुरुआत कर लो। इंडिया शेयर्स इट्स लॉन्गेस्ट लैंड बाउंड्री विथ बांग्लादेश। इंडिया शेयर्स इट्स लॉन्गेस्ट लैंड बाउंड्री विथ बांग्लादेश। Till 2015, this issue remained unresolved till 2015. This issue remained unresolved owing to this issue remained unresolved owing to factors like, or differences on factors like, till 2015 this issue remained unresolved owing to differences on factors like enclaves, undemarcated sections of boundary, undemarcated enclaves, undemarcated sections of boundaries, and adverse positions, Resolving these three issues was important. Resolving these three issues was important for a mutually satisfactory. Resolving these three issues was important for a mutually satisfactory solution, initially, paragraph change करके, initially the issue was taken up at the highest level, and it resulted in, initially the issue was taken up at the highest level and it resulted in signing of a land boundary agreement. Between the two countries, signing of the land boundary agreement between the two countries. In 1974, signing of the land boundary agreement between the two countries in 1974. While Bangladesh ratified the agreement immediately, such a process, comma करके, such a process remained pending in India, remained pending in India due to factors like advent of military rule in Bangladesh, advent of military rule in Bangladesh in 1975, and a lack of political consensus in India's federal polity, and a lack of political consensus in India's federal polity. With the coming to power of an Awami League government, in Bangladesh in 2008, with the coming to power of an Awami League government in Bangladesh in 2008, this issue was further taken up at the highest political levels. This issue was further taken up at the highest political level. After few years of negotiations, a protocol to the land boundary agreement was signed between the two sides in 2011. A protocol to the land boundary agreement was signed in 2011. This involved fresh surveys. And the addition of the issue of adverse possessions, Subsequently, with the passage of a constitutional amendment in India, the land boundary agreement was ratified. With the passage of a constitutional amendment in India, the land boundary agreement was ratified. With this, both sides agreed with this, both sides agreed that now there were no pending issues. With this, both sides agreed that now there were no pending issues pertaining to land boundary. Both sides agreed that there were no pending issues pertaining to the land boundary. The solution of issue of enclaves, involved exchange of 162 enclaves, with minimal population transfer. Similarly, lands in adverse possession were also deemed to have been exchanged. Similarly, lands in adverse possession were also deemed to have been exchanged. And undemarcated boundary in 3 sectors was finally demarcated by the two sides. And undemarcated boundaries in 3 sectors was finally demarcated by the two sides. The resolution of land boundary issue between the two sides has larger implications. The resolution of land boundary issue between the two sides has larger implications. Which can be stated as following. One, which can be stated as following. What implications are there? 1. It strengthened the bilateral ties between India and Bangladesh. It strengthened the bilateral ties between India and Bangladesh. Number 2, it allowed India to make progress in the fencing of its borders. It allowed India to make progress in the fencing of its borders. So border was unfenced. After this agreement, India has fenced 3,000 kilometers of borders, right? So border fencing could make progress. It allowed India to make progress in the fencing of its borders, thereby helping in managing the security related, managing the security related aspects in the region, managing the security related aspects in the region. Thirdly, this agreement helped in strengthening the neighborhood first approach. This agreement helped in strengthening the neighborhood first approach by signaling the neighborhood first approach, strengthening the neighborhood first approach by signaling to other smaller neighbors, India's willingness to resolve disputes, through peaceful bilateral negotiations. हाँ, तो ये तीन मेजर पॉइंट्स है. बाइलैटरली विद बांग्लादेश आर रिलेशंस इम्प्रूव्ड. व्हाई? बिकॉज दिस सिग्नल ट्रस्ट in the relationship that we are able to resolve the issue of territory, that too with negotiations. So it is a victory for diplomacy. Second point is security point. India wanted to fence its borders, but since border disputes had prevented such a possibility, resolution of border dispute meant that India was able to make progress in border fencing. और तीसरा क्या हुआ? In the larger regional sense, this sends a signal to our smaller neighbors that India is willing to compromise. India is willing to make compromise in the larger interest of regional stability. So thereby, so neighborhood first में हमारा approach क्या है? To create a narrative of leadership of India acceptable to our neighbors. So agreements like these helped India in strengthening the narrative of neighborhood first approach as well. So ये तीन broadly मेजर इम्प्लीकेशंस आप आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हैं, एक बायलैटरल रिलेशन के लिए, एक इंडिया की सिक्योरिटी के लिए और एक लार्जर रीजनल पॉलिसी के लिए, नेबरहुड पॉलिसी के लिए. नाउ व्हेन यू हैव दिस आइडिया दैट समटाइम्स यू डोंट नीड टू सेपरेटली राइट अ कंक्लूजन इन आंसर्स. जब क्वेश्चन क्लियरली सेकंड पार्ट आपसे कुछ बहुत ही स्पेसिफिक पूछ रहा हो, सो राइटिंग दोज स्पेसिफिक थिंग्स यू कैन थिंक दैट योर आंसर इज कंप्लीट. है ना, कई बार लोग पूछते हैं कंक्लूजन लिखने में दिक्कत आ रही है, इंट्रोडक्शन लिखने में दिक्कत आ रही है. रिमेंबर, एक कंक्लूजन पे आपको 40 नंबर नहीं मिलने वाले हैं और ना ही एक इंट्रोडक्शन पे आपको 40 नंबर मिलने वाले हैं. अल्टीमेटली यू हैव टू राइट द होल आंसर. सो डोंट गेट स्टक विद दीज काइंड्स ऑफ कंसर्न्स. स्टार्ट राइटिंग. पहला कंडीशन यही है, स्टार्ट राइटिंग. पुट पेन टू द पेपर. पहले गंदा आंसर लिखोगे, थोड़ा अपने को कोसोगे कि अच्छा नहीं लिखा, एंड उसके बाद धीरे धीरे दैट वुड इम्प्रूव. दैट इज समथिंग दैट यू शुड बी एबल टू डू रादर देन एक फिक्सेटेड आइडिया के साथ कि इंट्रोडक्शन कैसे लिखना है, कंक्लूजन कैसे लिखना है. पहले लिखना शुरू करो, इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन अपने आप आ जाएगा, है ना. दैट इज हाउ समटाइम्स आंसर्स डोंट रिक्वायर अ सेपरेट कंक्लूजन एंड समटाइम्स अ वेरी सिंपल इंट्रोडक्शन वुड ऑल्सो डू, है ना. तो अप्रिशिएट द आर्ट ऑफ आंसर राइटिंग इन इट्स एंटायरिटी. पूरा आंसर लिखना है, केवल इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन नहीं लिखना है. जब ऐसे लिखने जाओगे तो ज्यादा लंबा आपके पास मौका होगा. नाउ लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द सेकंड बाउंड्री इशू बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश, विच इज द मैरीटाइम boundary issue. So again, as the story with land boundary, India's maritime boundary with Bangladesh also was undemarcated. All right. Now, India and Bangladesh engaged in on and off negotiations on the issue. And in 2009, Bangladesh proposed that since India and Bangladesh were not able to resolve the issue on the basis of their negotiations, an alternative should be tried. What is that alternative? Going for arbitration. All right, that is what Bangladesh suggested. Well, let's go for arbitration. And you know that if one agrees for arbitration, then de facto one also agrees to accept the decision, whatever it may be. है ना? So India, being a larger country, agreed to arbitration. Though India preferred bilateral negotiations, but in this case India agreed for arbitration. That let's go for arbitration. We are not able to resolve this issue on the basis of our negotiations. Let's go for arbitration. So this arbitration then went on at international forums. PCA, Permanent Court of Arbitration, is where this issue was addressed, and in this context, the laws of the sea, called UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea, was used as the basis. But ultimately the decision was sovereign. India and Bangladesh decided that they are going to choose the method of arbitration, and they agreed that for arbitration the basis can be provided by UNCLOS. है ना? So UNCLOS basically is a technical body of international law which by and large provides the basis for determining rights and entitlements in the ocean. क्या है UNCLOS? It's a piece of legislation, piece of law. What it does, it provides the basis for determining what are the rights and obligations of any parties in the ocean. क्या limits हैं rights and obligation के किसी भी देश के. So two sovereigns decided to choose this method, and ultimately a total of 25,000 square kilometers of territory was in contention. Out of this, around 19,000 square kilometers of territory were given to Bangladesh, and around 6,000 square kilometers of territory came to India, meaning larger claims of Bangladesh were upheld by the arbitration, and India also received its share of territory, but not completely what it was demanding. But what is important here is that after the arbitration, there was earlier a dispute over the ownership of New Moor Islands. New Moor Islands were created majorly due to siltation, and it is located at the mouth of what is called the Haribhanga River. Haribhanga River, the mouth of Haribhanga River is where you had the New Moor Islands. So this, since it was a newly emergent island, so the question was who owns it, and ultimately the arbitration upheld India's ownership of the New Moor Island. So अब New Moor Island पे किसका control है? India का. So that has been also legalized. Now, in simple terms, UNCLOS basically is the basis on which this issue was resolved. And by and large, what is it that UNCLOS says? That suppose if the boundary has to be decided in the ocean, there has to be a baseline. है ना? So baseline, any water inside the baseline is internal waters. Internal waters. As you move across 12 nautical miles, what is it called? Territorial waters or territorial sea. Further 12 nautical miles, meaning total of 24 nautical miles from the baseline, is contiguous zone. And then further 200 nautical miles is the length of exclusive economic zone. So basically these kinds of principles are provided by the UNCLOS. In the territorial water, a country has complete sovereignty on the water surface, on the water column, on the seabed, and also on the air space above the water column. है ना, यहाँ पे complete sovereignty है. Ships, if they are passing through this region, they are coming from point A and they are going to point B, and they are passing through this region, have a right to what is called innocent passage. मतलब आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि कोई और देश का शिप इस इलाके से नहीं जा सकता. अगर वो एक नॉर्मल कोर्स में लीगली फॉर लीगल एक्टिविटीज फॉर ट्रेड एटसेट्रा इज पासिंग फ्रॉम पॉइंट 1 to point A to point B, ships have the right of innocent passage. मान लो शिप ने zigzag मूवमेंट किया, या हमको लगता है कि ship is basically the behavior of the ship is doubtful, then we can stop the ship and ask for the reasons or check it, but generally ships have right of innocent passage. Contiguous zone में क्या होता है? Contiguous zone में your sovereignty starts getting diluted. So a country's law enforcement in this area, contiguous zone, is limited to what are called fiscal rules. If somebody has violated the fiscal rule and is running away, then a country can apprehend them here. And the rules related with sanitation and health. Pollution को prevent करने के लिए, contamination को prevent करने के लिए, a country can enforce its laws in this particular zone, right? So fiscal laws and sanitation and health related laws can be enforced by a country in this particular zone, but a country does not have sovereignty over the air space in the contiguous zone. है ना, टेरिटोरियल सी के अंदर एयर स्पेस पे भी सोवरेनिटी है, कॉन्टिगुअस जोन में एयर स्पेस पे सोवरेनिटी नहीं है. यही अंतर है टेरिटोरियल सी और कॉन्टिगुअस जोन का मेजर अंतर. इन टेरिटोरियल सी देयर इज सोवरेनिटी ओवर द एयर स्पेस ऑल्सो. इन कॉन्टिगुअस जोन sovereignty over airspace does not apply. And then when you are talking about exclusive economic zone, here the sovereignty is limited to resource exploitation. Any resources within the exclusive economic zone of any country, that particular country has complete sovereignty over those resources on the water column, in the water column, on the seabed, on the water surface. If there are any resources, who has the exclusive right? The country which is located within 200 nautical miles of that particular zone. So exclusive economic zone, the sovereignty is limited to resources, right? Territorial sea, complete sovereignty with an exception of right of innocent passage for international shipping. Contiguous zone, sovereignty starts getting limited. First of all, no sovereignty in the airspace, and law enforcement limited to fiscal laws, health and sanitation related laws. Exclusive economic zone, the right is limited to resource development. यहाँ आपके resources आप control करते हैं. So basically, when we made UNCLOS the basis of maritime boundary resolution with Bangladesh, it was important for Bangladesh. Why? Because Bangladesh is triangulated between the maritime space of India and the maritime space of Myanmar. So UNCLOS और जो ट्रिब्यूनल एस्टैब्लिश हुआ था उसने क्या किया, पहले एक इक्वी डिस्टेंस लाइन खींची इंडिया और बांग्लादेश के क्लेम्स के बीच में, और उसके बाद डिसाइड किया कि व्हाट इज द लेंथ ऑफ एक्सक्लूसिव इकोनॉमिक जोन, कॉन्टिगुअस जोन एंड टेरिटोरियल वाटर्स ऑफ बांग्लादेश, है ना. सो पहले इक्वी डिस्टेंस लाइन बाउंड्री क्रिएट किया, उससे क्या हुआ, नाउ देर इज क्लैरिटी वेयर बांग्लादेश इज एक्सक्लूसिव इकोनॉमिक जोन इज, where Bangladesh's territorial sea is, where Bangladesh's contiguous zone is. So that was the process. From the perspective of the examination, generally the demarcation within UNCLOS is important. UNCLOS, simply remember, we used in the context of demarcation of boundary with Bangladesh. Right? What was the major outcome of this negotiation? ये भी हम समझ गए that around 25,000 square kilometers of territory was in contention. Out of that, as the boundary was demarcated, Bangladesh got more than 19,000 square kilometers. India received 6,000 square kilometers. Bangladesh received clarity on its exclusive economic zone, territorial sea and contiguous zone. More importantly, India received clarity on the ownership of New Moor Island. So India को New Moor Island मिल गया. Now what is the significance of this particular agreement? इसका क्या significance है? टेल मी. अब तो एक चीज की सिग्निफिकेंस के बारे में बात कर चुके हैं हम, लैंड बाउंड्री एग्रीमेंट के बारे में. व्हाट इज द सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ रिजॉल्विंग द मैरीटाइम बाउंड्री एग्रीमेंट बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश? ऑफ कोर्स फर्स्ट पॉइंट वुड बी बेटर रिलेशंस बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश, बायलैटरल रिलेशंस इंप्रूव्ड. व्हाट इज द अदर पॉइंट? कहां से आवाज आई भाई? क्या? ट्रेड. कैसे? मैरीटाइम ट्रेड कैसे? चलिए मान लिया आपकी बात. आगे और कोई पॉइंट है? एक वर्ड में आपने डिफाइन कर दिया, ट्रेड. और कोई कुछ कहना चाहेगा? पीछे उनको नींद आ रही है. तो वी कैन बेसिकली थिंक ऑफ इट डिप्लोमेटिकली. क्या हुआ? बायलैटरल रिलेशंस बिटवीन India and Bangladesh improved as a result of this agreement, meaning this agreement led to the strengthening of bilateral relations. पहला simple point तो ये रख ही सकते हो that if we are making an agreement resolving an issue, that means we are strengthening our bilateral relations. Secondly, it strengthened the possibility of resource exploitation in the region. What does it mean? Now there is no boundary dispute, so resources like fisheries, or some people argue that this region may have significant reserves of hydrocarbons, can be developed. They can be developed either by India on its own side or Bangladesh on its own side, or if they decide, they can cooperate and jointly develop these resources. So second point is development of resources. Third point, it strengthens the approach towards maritime and coastal security. So whenever there is a territorial dispute or a boundary dispute in a region, that in itself is a threat to maritime and coastal security, because there is a contention. When you resolve the dispute, it strengthens your preparedness for maritime and coastal security, because first of all, a source of contention, a source of threat itself is removed. Second of all, it opens the possibility of cooperation in this particular region. So that is why you would see India and Bangladesh after this were able to put in place their maritime exercise, which is known as CORPAT, Coordinated Patrol. That is the idea. Third idea, or the fourth idea is, again, it is a victory for diplomacy. It is a victory for diplomacy, meaning boundary issues may lead to conflicts, have resulted in wars. Here, two countries are able to resolve that issue even after failing to resolve it first through negotiations. They were able to resolve it peacefully ultimately through arbitration. So it is victory for diplomacy. And again, as we have seen in the case of land boundary agreement, it signals India's magnanimity to the smaller neighbors. छोटे neighbors को ये एक संदेश है, ये एक signal है that India is willing to compromise. We are not a big brother. We look at others as equals and we are willing to compromise in the interest of long term relations. है ना, मतलब हमसे दोस्ती करके आपको फायदा है ना. तो ये बेसिकली then is strengthening what India's neighborhood first approach, because we are basically conveying to our smaller neighbors that look, if Bangladesh decided to have good relations with India, we reciprocated, we basically responded, so we are willing to respond. ये दो पॉइंट इसलिए भी इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाते हैं कि लेटर ऑन यू वुड सी सिमिलर डिस्प्यूट्स इन साउथ चाइना सी, है ना. कॉन्ट्रास्ट कर सकते हैं आप द कंडक्ट ऑफ चाइना ऑन सिमिलर मैटर्स इन साउथ चाइना सी विद दैट ऑफ इंडिया. तो ये हमारे इंटरनेशनल इमेज का भी एक को स्ट्रेंथन करता है. कैसे? अगेन, while China in its dispute with Philippines disagreed with the final verdict of Permanent Court of Arbitration, violated international law, a larger country like India is setting an example how you can abide by international law, thereby strengthen international law. So जहां चाइना ने इसी तरह के सेम डिस्प्यूट पे साउथ चाइना सी में इंटरनेशनल आर्बिट्रेशन प्रोसीडिंग्स को मानने से इनकार कर दिया, वहीं उसके सामने एग्जाम्पल है इंडिया जैसे देश का, जिसने पाकिस्तान, बांग्लादेश को ज्यादा मिला, हमको कम मिला, लेकिन उसके बाद भी हमने इन द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ पीस वी एक्सेप्टेड दैट जजमेंट, राइट. सो ये लार्जर इंप्लीकेशन है इन लास्ट 2 पॉइंट्स का, दैट वी अल्टीमेटली वांट टू कन्वे अ सर्टेन मैसेज टू द इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी, टू आवर नेबर्स. Similarly, this also paves the way for better regional cooperation in the Bay of Bengal region. Bay of Bengal के अंदर this agreement opens up the possibility for better regional cooperation under the framework of BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC क्या है? बे ऑफ बंगाल इनिशिएटिव फॉर मल्टी सेक्टोरल टेक्निकल एंड इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन. एक रीजनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, इंडिया और बांग्लादेश दोनों उसके मेंबर्स हैं. इंडिया, बांग्लादेश, म्यांमार, थाईलैंड, श्रीलंका, ये सारे देश मेंबर्स हैं. इसके अलावा नेपाल और भूटान. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि अब बे ऑफ बंगाल में, सिंस दिस वाज द लास्ट मैरीटाइम बाउंड्री डिस्प्यूट, when it has been resolved, there is no maritime boundary dispute in the Bay of Bengal region. So इसका मतलब है कि now BIMSTEC countries have one less contention and now it can pave the way for better regional cooperation in the Bay of Bengal region, and we are saying under the BIMSTEC. So that is the idea, that in Bay of Bengal after this there is no maritime boundary dispute. अब कोई भी देशों के बीच में कोई maritime boundary dispute नहीं है. So then it means cooperation, regional cooperation on the basis of common identity of Bay of Bengal can take place, and we are saying that can take place under the BIMSTEC. So that is basically how we are looking at the benefits of signing the maritime boundary agreement. We start with the simple point that it strengthens India-Bangladesh bilateral relations, because primarily it was a bilateral issue of contention. Secondly, we are saying, we are bringing some sort of economic point. We are saying that this region has significant resources like fisheries and some people argue hydrocarbons. So once the political dispute over boundary is resolved, it opens up the possibility for resource exploitation and development of resources in this region, either by India on its own side or Bangladesh on its own side, or both of them jointly. Thirdly, it strengthens maritime and coastal security preparedness, first of all by removing a potential source of conflict, and second of all opening the possibility of cooperation between India and Bangladesh. One example is how they have established Corpat as a naval exercise after this. It is a victory for diplomacy. It is important in the international context, wherein small trade disputes or more complex territorial disputes have led to protracted conflicts. Here, with the help of diplomacy, the complex issue was resolved. And it signals India's magnanimity to smaller neighbors. It sends them a signal that India, even it is a larger country, even though it is a larger country, it is willing to compromise. And it becomes important when you look at a parallel example, as I said, in South China Sea, where China on similar matters has consistently violated international law. तो यहाँ पे हम अपने को थोड़ा सा अलग भी साबित कर दे रहे हैं चाइना से, है ना? तो ये है बेसिकली दो इश्यूज जो है लैंड बाउंड्री और मैरीटाइम बाउंड्री जो रिजॉल्व हुई. अब आपके पास कोई क्वेश्चन है तो प्लीज पूछ लें. आपके पास है. मैंने तो आज तक किसी का नाम नहीं लिया है, तो मैं अभी भी किसी का नाम नहीं लूंगा. मेरा सिंपल सा प्रिंसिपल है, इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस इज अबाउट कॉन्टेक्स्ट, टाइम, कॉन्टेक्स्ट, ये ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है पर्सनालिटीज के मुकाबले. तो आप कहां पहुंच गए इंदिरा गांधी के रोल पे, क्या पूछना चाहते हैं? पहले तो किसी क्वेश्चन में मेंशन करने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी, है ना, क्योंकि आप इंडिया की बात कर रहे हैं. आप अलग से क्यों किसी को लाना चाहते हैं, क्यों किसी विवाद में पड़ना चाहते हैं, है ना? देखो, ये कहने की बात है कि कोई एक व्यक्ति ने ये कर दिया, कोई एक व्यक्ति ने वो कर दिया. अल्टीमेटली इट इज अबाउट सिस्टम्स, इट इज अबाउट इंस्टीट्यूशंस, है ना. किसी एक व्यक्ति से नहीं होता कुछ भी. तो अननेसेसरीली इंडिविजुअल्स को लाके हम क्या कर रहे हैं, हम बेसिकली कंट्रोवर्सी में जा सकते हैं. इसलिए हमको किसी का नाम लेने की जरूरत नहीं है. आप बहुत ही खुशी खुशी आपने पूछा, मैंने आपको निराश किया. मेरी सलाह ये है कि इंडिविजुअल्स और लोगों का नाम लेकर के किसी कंट्रोवर्सी पे आप ना पढ़ें, उसको सब्जेक्टिव ना बनाएं, उसको ऑब्जेक्टिव रहने दें, है ना. सो ऑब्वियसली इट इज आर्ग्यूड दैट इंदिरा गांधी प्लेड अ वेरी डिसाइसिव रोल इन दैट पर्टिकुलर पीरियड. छोड़िए, और कोई सवाल और रिलेवेंट सवाल इसके अलावा? नहीं, गलत सवाल नहीं था, मैं ऐसा नहीं कह रहा आपसे. कोई सवाल नहीं है. चलिए, फिर से अपने आर्टिकल पे ही पहुंच गए. देखो, मैं शुरुआती क्लास से तुम्हें दो तीन चीजें बताने की कोशिश कर रहा हूं. देयर इज अ थ्योरी, देयर इज अ प्रिंसिपल एंड देयर इज अ प्रैक्टिस. तो रियल पॉलिटिक हम हमेशा कहते हैं, जैसे मिलिट्री से जुड़े हुए मुद्दों पे हम सिक्योरिटी को ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंस दें. रियल पॉलिटिक्स, रियलिटी को रिस्पॉन्ड करना. मोरल पॉलिटिक क्या हो गया, हम प्रिंसिपल्स की बात करें, है ना. जैसे कि अब ज्यादा आसान होगा ये कहना कि यार बांग्लादेश ये करता है तो हमको बदले में ये करना चाहिए, रादर देन ये कहना कि नहीं नहीं नहीं, इंडिया इज अ लार्ज कंट्री, वी कैन मेक टैक्टिकल कॉम्प्रोमाइज इन द लार्जर स्ट्रेटेजिक इंटरेस्ट. तो बेसिकली देर इज ऑलवेज अ टेंशन बिटवीन द कॉम्पोनेंट ऑफ रियलिटी एंड कॉम्पोनेंट ऑफ मोरालिटी इन इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस. अगर आप मोरालिटी फॉलो करेंगे तो कहीं हो सकता है कि आपके इंटरेस्ट प्रभावित हों, है ना. तो हमेशा एक डिस्टिंक्शन किया जाता है रियल पॉलिटिक और मोरल पॉलिटिक में. मतलब व्हाट इज, रियलिज्म का मतलब क्या हुआ, रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू व्हाट इज. और अगर आप मोरल पॉलिटिक की बात कर रहे हैं, व्हाट ऑट टू बी, ये होना चाहिए और ये है. तो रियल पॉलिटिक का मतलब हो गया रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू क्या है, व्हाट इज. मोरल पॉलिटिक का क्या मतलब हो गया, रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू और टॉकिंग अबाउट व्हाट ऑट टू बी. रियल पॉलिटिक का मतलब क्या हो गया, रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू प्रैक्टिकल नेसेसिटीज ऑफ द सिचुएशन. और मोरल पॉलिटिक का मतलब क्या हो गया, रिस्पॉन्डिंग टू प्रिंसिपल्स दैट यू हैव, है ना. प्रिंसिपल से आप कॉम्प्रोमाइज ना करें. तो ये टेंशन हमेशा बना रहता है कि हम क्या करें, क्या हम बलूचिस्तान में जाके इंसर्जेंसी प्रमोट करें. तो वो ओपनली आप कह नहीं सकते, तो जनरली आप प्रिंसिपल्स की बात करते हैं, है ना. तो ये जनरली होता है कि आप जैसे मान लो कि नो फर्स्ट यूज एक प्रिंसिपल है, नो फर्स्ट यूज एक प्रिंसिपल है. मोरल पॉलिटिक ये कि भाई हम पहले न्यूक्लियर वेपन यूज नहीं करेंगे. लेकिन कोई ऐसा सिनेरियो आ ही सकता है ना जब आपके पास पहले न्यूक्लियर वेपन को इस्तेमाल करने के अलावा कोई चारा ही ना बचे, तो वहां पे पहले न्यूक्लियर वेपन इस्तेमाल करना क्या होगा? रियल पॉलिटिक। मोरल पॉलिटिक क्या है कि नहीं भाई हमारा एक प्रिंसिपल है, नो फर्स्ट यूज हमारा एक प्रिंसिपल है, वी विल स्टैंड बाय इट। सो देयर मे बी एन इमेजिनेबल सिचुएशन वेयर देयर इज अ टेंशन। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, वी हैव एन इंटेलिजेंस, अ वेरी क्रेडिबल इंटेलिजेंस, दैट इफ we don't do anything, Pakistan or China is going to attack us with nuclear weapons. तो आपके पास जब ये इंटेलिजेंस है कि पाकिस्तान और चाइना इज गोइंग टू अटैक अस विथ न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स, देन व्हाट डू यू डू? डू यू स्टैंड विथ द प्रिंसिपल ऑफ नो फर्स्ट यूज, और डू यू एक्चुअली रिस्पॉन्ड टू व्हाट इज? अगर आपको एकदम क्रेडिबल इंफॉर्मेशन है कि ऐसा हो सकता है, तो उस सिचुएशन में क्या होगा? आप अपनी मोरल पॉलिटिक को छोड़ के रियल पॉलिटिक को रिस्पॉन्ड कर रहे होंगे, है ना? तो डिपेंडिंग ऑन द सिचुएशन, रियल पॉलिटिक मॉरल पॉलिटिक के अंदर कॉन्ग्रुएंस हो सकता है ना? ऐसी सिचुएशंस हो सकती हैं जहां पे आप जो कर रहे हो वो प्रैक्टिकल भी हो और वो विद इन प्रिंसिपल्स भी हो। आइडियली जिंदगी भर ऐसा ही होता रहे तो बहुत बढ़िया कि आपके प्रिंसिपल्स और आपके प्रैक्टिस सेम है। और कुछ सिचुएशन में क्या है, आप ज्यादा प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट्स को ध्यान देते हो। जैसे ब्यूरोक्रेसी में क्या कहते हैं कि भाई देयर आर रूल्स, है ना? पर एक ब्यूरोक्रेट जो केवल रूल की बात करता रहे, क्या वो सक्सेसफुल ब्यूरोक्रेट हो सकता है? सो देयर इज ऑलवेज समथिंग कॉल्ड द ह्यूमन टच, सो दैट्स व्हाई देयर इज डिस्क्रिशन। कुछ तो डिस्क्रिशन में भी होती है चीजें ब्यूरोक्रेट के। चलिए, हाउ आर वी डीलिंग विद बांग्लादेश ऑन इंसर्जेंसी? रोहन जैन, वी आर नॉट डीलिंग विद बांग्लादेश ऑन इंसर्जेंसी, वी डोंट सी बांग्लादेश एज अ प्रॉब्लम एज ऑफ नाउ, बट we have regular border talks with Bangladesh, we have regular home ministry talks with Bangladesh. So at the level of dialogue, the relevant issues are taken up with Bangladesh. Now, let's talk about the next issue. As we had said, what is the next issue that we had talked about? Water issues. So here, we will note down a few things, जो कि आपको पता भी है. First of all, around 55 transboundary rivers are shared between India and Bangladesh. All right, around 55 transboundary rivers. इतनी rivers हैं. ये जरूरी नहीं है कि आप 55 exactly याद रखें. In the mains examination situation, if you remember 50, more than 50, around 50, वो भी ठीक है. All right, you are simply conveying a fact that transboundary rivers, shared transboundary rivers are important aspect of this relationship. Which are the major ones? The GBM basin. India and Bangladesh share the Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna basin. तीस्ता भी इसी basin का हिस्सा है. तीस्ता is a tributary of Brahmaputra. All right, so अलग से आपको नाम लिख लेंगे, but Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna basin is the shared basin between India and Bangladesh. Is it considered to be the second largest hydrological region in the world? First, or the largest hydrological region in the world is the Amazon basin in terms of discharge of water. So according to some estimate, this is the second largest hydrological region in the world in terms of discharge of, collective discharge of water in these rivers. Now, these are on the one hand share resources which call for cooperation, right? So on the one hand, these shared rivers, this basin is a shared resource which calls for cooperation. If both sides have to benefit from this resource, the ideal way is cooperation, cooperate. All right, India has the capability, India has the capital, which can be shared with Bangladesh. All right. Similarly, Bangladesh is a lower riparian and an important neighbor, so it is sensitive about certain things, so that has to be taken into consideration. However, moral politic, real politic. However, these rivers have also been source of contention between the two sides. So ideally क्या होना चाहिए? This should be seen as shared resource. This should promote cooperation. Practical scenario में हमने क्या देखा है? that resources are also subject to competition. So thereby दोनों को पानी चाहिए, दोनों को पानी चाहिए, दोनों अपने अपने अधिकार जानते हैं, तो it has also been source of contention between the two countries. ये बहुत ही simple सा fact है जो आपको clear होना चाहिए. Now what has happened in this context? First of all, both sides are aware of this issue. So what they did was in 1972 they created what? Joint Rivers Commission. This body exists even now. ये अभी भी exist करता है. The purpose of Joint Rivers Commission was to conduct surveys, to support research on the issues of water in this basin, thereby promote resolution of water issues between the two sides. So it is very clear that from quite early on in the relationship, both sides are aware that water can be a contentious issue, and they had the willingness to resolve it, so they constituted the Joint Rivers Commission. First dispute between the two sides that emerged was the issue of Farakka Barrage, meaning on the Ganges stream, India built the Farakka Barrage. The idea was that it needed some water to be diverted to the Hooghly stream so that the riverine port, Kolkata riverine port, can be desilted. And siltation की बहुत problem है. So to maintain adequate flow of water, India wanted to use some water of Ganges through the structure of Farakka Barrage, apart from other purposes, for the desiltation of the riverine ports. So Bangladesh thought that it may affect its own rights. So initially it became a bilateral issue, then Bangladesh raised it on international forums. It is suffice to say that an initial agreement, first agreement on Farakka agreement was signed between these two sides in 1977, first agreement. So these two sides were able to resolve the issue for the time being through the Farakka agreement of 1977. So this is the first experience of negotiation. Now going forward, this particular agreement gave way to a larger agreement. 1996, remember we say when there is Awami League government, there is cooperation. 1996, Awami League government is in power. So 1996, Gujarat Doctrine also comes into existence. Alright, so this can be an example of that also. What has India done with its smaller neighbor? 1996, India and Bangladesh sign a Ganges water agreement. This is a larger agreement on water sharing. Specifically in the lean season, in the non-monsoon season. Ganges water agreement was signed, and this is a 30-year agreement. मतलब क्या है? 1996 to 2026, कुछ ही साल में क्या होगा? ये एग्रीमेंट एक्सपायर होना, इसका मतलब क्या है? या तो रिन्यू करना पड़ेगा, है ना, या फिर नया एग्रीमेंट साइन करना पड़ेगा. बट दिस वाज an agreement which generally we say that there it has been working smoothly, satisfactorily. प्रॉब्लम है, बातचीत जॉइंट रिवर कमीशन के लेवल पे होती है, बांग्लादेश अपने शेयर की बात करता है, बट वी जनरली से दैट दिस एग्रीमेंट हैज बीन परफॉर्मिंग satisfactory. So this is another agreement that India and Bangladesh signed, Ganges water agreement. So this is basically how we have tried to resolve issues of water. But what remains unresolved is the Teesta issue. All right, the Teesta issue. Teesta is considered to be a litmus test. A litmus test for the future of these relations. Litmus test कहते हैं इसको कि resolving this issue constitutes the litmus test for the future of this relation. India and Bangladesh relation क्या होंगे, कैसे होंगे, ये to an extent depends on whether they are able to resolve the Teesta issue or not. So first of all, just understand, Teesta originates in Sikkim. Teesta then flows through northern part of West Bengal, yes, the hilly regions, North Bengal, and then it enters Bangladesh, and in Bangladesh it joins the Jamuna stream, है ना? This is how Teesta is flowing, originating in Sikkim, flowing through northern parts of West Bengal, and then entering into Bangladesh, and then there joining the Jamuna stream. क्यों important है ये? ये simple सी जानकारी, because UPSC has asked a question on this particular issue. और उस क्वेश्चन के अंदर अगर आपको कुछ भी नहीं मालूम है, आपको इतना मालूम है कि the Teesta does not enter into the ocean directly, but it meets the Jamuna stream, you are able to answer that question. So geography और location based question को भी आप बहुत simplicity के साथ समझ सकते हैं. Simple information can help you in answering a lot of question. Difficult, मुश्किल question होते हैं एग्जाम के अंदर. But remember, preliminary examination केवल मुश्किल question के बारे में नहीं है. Every exam, when it is aiming to eliminate large number of students, would have a combination of questions. Easy questions में हमको क्या करना है? गलत नहीं करना है उनको. Easy questions कोशिश करना है कि हम सही कर लें, क्योंकि easy question आपने गलत किया तो इसका मतलब ये है कि आपके competitors, the greater possibility is that your competitors have marked that question correctly. Secondly, questions of medium difficulty. Again, majority of questions in the examination fall in this category. Majority of questions where some effort would be required. But with adequate practice, practice का क्या मतलब होता है? केवल ये नहीं कि information याद कर लिया. Elimination सीखा, options को देखना सीखा, looking at the question paper from different perspective. And then lastly, very small portion of the question paper is difficult questions. Difficult question आपका समय बर्बाद करने के लिए होते हैं. Difficult questions are to either waste your time or to force you to make mistakes. So don't make unforced error. है ना? वो ईगो पे नहीं लेना है कि मैं 100 सवाल करके आऊंगा. ईगो पे लेने का एग्जाम नहीं है. Wherever you think that some question is unattainable, मान लो कि ऐसे क्वेश्चन हो सकते हैं एग्जाम में. Let them go. Try and not mess up easy questions. Why? Because that is the easiest way for your elimination. आपने easy questions गलत किए, इसका मतलब ये है कि आप competition में पीछे हो गए. Medium difficulty question, largest range of question, वहां पे आपको अपने को अप्लाई करना पड़ेगा. That is where your selection is determined. So sometimes questions can be answered on the basis of a very simple information. इसीलिए again I would say NCERT, India Geography, chapter on drainage is an important chapter जिससे आप बहुत सारे क्वेश्चन आंसर कर सकते हैं. नाउ दिस इशू इज अबाउट द शेयरिंग ऑफ वाटर शेयरिंग बिटवीन इंडिया एंड बांग्लादेश ऑन दिस पर्टिकुलर रिवर स्ट्रीम. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, what is the main issue? The main issue is first of all, dissatisfaction over the 1983 interim agreement. So India and Bangladesh had entered into an interim agreement, initial agreement on the sharing of Teesta in 1983. But over the years, what has happened is Bangladesh demands 50% of share of waters of Teesta. And that is what Bangladesh is saying. So India also says, Bhaiya, we also need water as much as you do. So it is not possible to increase the share. So from different perspectives, there is dissatisfaction over the existing agreement. Similarly, we find that while there are claims and counterclaims, what we see in real circumstances is this, that due to activities like industrialization, urbanization, population increase, all these factors have meant that water demand has gone up. पूरी दुनिया की यही कहानी है, जहां भी इंसान गए वहां क्या हुआ है, स्कैरसिटी आने लगी है, चाहे हमको कितना भी रिसोर्स दे दो वो काफी नहीं होगा. ऑलराइट, so industrialization, urbanization, increase in population have meant that there has been an increase in water demand in the basin. Water demand has gone up. On the other hand, water availability has become unpredictable. Variable across the year. Why? One factor is climate change. All right, glacial melting, rains. So पानी जब आपको चाहिए उसी समय अवेलेबल वैसा जरूरी नहीं है. So water demand has gone up. Water availability has become unpredictable. It has become variable. Right? So that is basically what climate change would entail. अनप्रेडिक्टेबल इवेंट्स, एक्सट्रीम क्लाइमेट इवेंट्स. कहीं बारिश हुई तो इतनी हुई कि अब पानी का इस्तेमाल करने के बारे में नहीं सोचोगे, पानी से बचने के बारे में सोचोगे. और कहीं बारिश नहीं हुई तो सालों साल सूखा पड़ा रहा. तो जनरली इन दिस रीजन ऑल्सो वी सी दैट ह्यूमन एक्टिविटीज प्लस क्लाइमेटिक फैक्टर्स हैव मेंट दैट देयर इज अ मिसमैच बिटवीन वाटर डिमांड एंड वाटर अवेलेबिलिटी. सो दैट इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर. So thereby what we see is that there has been in recent time an effort to negotiate a solution on this issue. Negotiations have been ongoing. One result of the negotiation was 2011 draft agreement. 2011 में क्या हुआ, India and Bangladesh had prepared a draft of an agreement. है ना, बातचीत कर ली, टेक्निकल इश्यूज डिस्कस कर लिए और उसके बाद there was a draft agreement which was prepared और उसको बस साइन किया जाना बाकी था. है ना. The idea was that in that particular year Prime Minister Manmohan Singh would be visiting Bangladesh. उनके साथ ममता दी भी जाएंगी और an agreement would be signed. An agreement would be signed, but ultimately the West Bengal government opposed the draft agreement. है ना. So consistently जो West Bengal government है उनको प्रॉब्लम रही है इस रिवर पे कॉम्प्रोमाइज करने से. हाँ, ये हंसने की बात नहीं है. रिमेंबर, अपना कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन देखो, व्हाट इज द प्रोविजन रिगार्डिंग रिवर्स देयर. वाटर अलग अलग जगह पे आता है ना. वाटर अलग अलग जगह पे आता है, अलग अलग प्रोविजन है वाटर के लिए. वाटर डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशन के भी अलग अलग प्रोविजन है. पार्लियामेंट इज एम्पावर्ड टू पास अ लेजिस्लेशन. पार्लियामेंट ने लेजिस्लेशन पास भी किया, बट अल्टीमेटली इश्यूज लाइक वाटर, इश्यूज लाइक रिवर्स आर पार्ट ऑफ इंडियाज फेडरल पॉलिटी. है ना, वेयर सेंटर हैज इट्स ओन राइट्स. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल इन फॉरेन पॉलिसी सेंटर हैज द राइट टू एंटर इनटू ट्रीटीज. But on water, the rights and responsibilities are rather distributed. तो यहाँ पे अब प्रॉब्लम ये है कि सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट कैन एंटर इनटू एन एग्रीमेंट, बट दैट एग्रीमेंट वुड नॉट बी इफेक्टिव अनलेस देयर इज डोमेस्टिक पॉलिटिकल कॉन्सेंसस. है ना. तो बेसिकली दिस इज व्हाट हैज हैपेंड. वेस्ट बंगाल चीफ मिनिस्टर, वेस्ट बंगाल गवर्नमेंट्स हैव बीन अपोजिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर एग्रीमेंट. नाउ व्हाट इज द प्रॉब्लम, व्हाई आर दे अपोजिंग इट. तीस्ता का पानी किसको चाहिए, आपको, मुझको. मेरे लिए ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है यमुना. है ना, यमुना साफ हो, यमुना में पानी हो. तीस्ता वाटर अल्टीमेटली इज ऑल अबाउट द पीपल ऑफ दैट बेसिन. तीस्ता passes through West Bengal. West Bengal has a elected government, so the responsibility of that elected government is towards its own people. एक तो नॉर्दर्न रीजन से भी पास कर रहा है, विच इज पॉलिटिकली सेंसिटिव रीजन ऑफ वेस्ट बंगाल. So it would be politically difficult for any chief minister of West Bengal to accept a compromise on this river. But in national interest, the union governments have considered that making a compromise with Bangladesh is desirable. अब यहां पे बात अटक गई. तो बेसिकली अब क्या करना चाहिए इसके समाधान के लिए? So West Bengal government says, first of all, the catchment area of Teesta largely falls within India. That is what West Bengal government is saying, that the catchment area जहां से पानी आता है वो largely कहां पे है? Within India. All right. Secondly, Bangladesh is already receiving its share of water. कहां से? From the Ganges Water Agreement and the earlier Teesta Agreement, Bangladesh is already receiving its share of water. So there is no further scope for any compromise. ये इनका कहना है. तो अब हम क्या कर सकते हैं? The question is, how can we adequately manage and resolve the issue? कैसे मैनेज कर सकते हैं, कैसे रिजॉल्व कर सकते हैं इशू? How can we adequately manage and adequately resolve the issue? How can we do that? क्या करना चाहिए हमें? So when you are resolving or solving any issue, it is ideal to take into consideration what has already happened. So first of all, the 1983 interim agreement should be implemented scrupulously और स्ट्रिक्टली. जब तक फाइनल सॉल्यूशन नहीं निकल आता, जो एग्जिस्टिंग सॉल्यूशन है उसको इंप्लीमेंट करना चाहिए फॉर शेयरिंग द वाटर. सेकेंडली, अनदर सॉल्यूशन दैट हैड कम अप एट द लेवल ऑफ गवर्नमेंट इज द 2011 draft agreement. The 2011 draft agreement can provide a solution. यहां पे जरूरत क्या है? The 2011 draft agreement can provide a solution. The need is to build a political consensus around it. क्या करना है हमको? छुट्टी हो गई? ये आखिरी लाइन लिख लो, फिर चले जाना. सो व्हाट इज रिक्वायर्ड? फर्स्ट, जो ऑलरेडी एग्रीमेंट है उसको इंप्लीमेंट करते रहिए. सेकेंड, 2011 ड्राफ्ट एग्रीमेंट कैन प्रोवाइड द सॉल्यूशन, बट व्हाट इज द रिक्वायरमेंट? टू बिल्ड पॉलिटिकल कॉन्सेंसस on this solution till this solution is implemented. तो छुट्टी का टाइम हो गया, आप जा सकते हैं. We in the next class will continue with rest of the issues of Bangladesh and then lineup में क्या है हमारे? Nepal and Bhutan, right? So after Bangladesh we will look at relations with Nepal and Bhutan, है ना? तो ये हम कंटिन्यू करते रहेंगे. उसके बाद श्रीलंका, मालदीव्स के साथ ओवर.